Hey guys. This is what if Naruto can use unlimited blade works. At one point in time in another universe, I, Uzumaki Naruto, wanted to become Hokage above all else. It was what I strived and trained to become. But here, I felt I had a greater calling. One that transcended above all else. It fueled my desires, my ambitions, my dreams, to become not a shinobi, but a hero. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 1 Prologue. I was born into a world filled with death. A merciless world where the weak perished, and the strongest thrived. The moment I was brought into this world, not even an hour I experienced tragedy. It's all merely a vague memory for me. Innately I could feel the stench of death pervade all around me. Did you know a child innately connects with their parents at first sight? It was through that I could feel my mother's suffering and pain through our connection. Through that I could feel my father's struggle and his frustrations. I don't fully know what happened on the night of my birth, but intrinsically, deep down inside, it changed me. It left its marks that will never go away. Never to truly heal. Growing up, I had a connection with the leader of my village. As a young child, the word Hokage reverberated within me, but it never really sunk to my soul. It was a great aspiration, but inside it felt like it wasn't enough. That there was something more that I could become. As a child, I never really knew what I wanted. Never really knowing what it was. Never really realizing what was going on inside me. That is until I woke up surrounded by rubble and fire. I was barely 4 years old at the time. Death. Screams of people trapped under the rubble and wreckage of a part of the village that I lived in. Their homes crumbled. The shops and markets being burnt away. Parks being consumed by the atrocious fire. Roads melting from the heat radiated from the fire. Fire. It was just everywhere, and it burned through everything in its path, completely merciless to all that encountered its flames of death. There was so much smoke filling in the air that it became burdensome to breathe. These people reached out to me as I walked past them, yelling in agony and reaching out for any measure of help. But I didn't give them any help. I trudged on through the flames and destruction, ignoring their pleas for help, begging for it. But I ignored them and continued on, leaving them to their death. I was only concentrated on myself surviving through this place, this hell. Hell. A word that I didn't know at the time, but would be an apt description of what was going on at the time. I saw hell that day. I lived through hell that day. As I continued to wade through that hell, I felt my body begging to give up. To simply lie down and die. A part of me agreed so much to simply let go and stop this pain. But I couldn't. I didn't. I kept going no matter what. I wanted to survive so badly. To wake up from this nightmare that I was in the middle of. But I couldn't. My body simply gave up at one point and I collapsed on my back near a building. It was too tired to power forward any longer. My mind screamed to get up, but my body yelled back saying it couldn't. The soot and ash fell around me. The stench of fire, ash, and bodies burning were so strong you could literally choke on it. It made you want to just gag. I didn't mind it though, well, more like I couldn't. I was too tired to even care anymore. I willed my body to try and move. All I got in response was pain and something heavy on top of me. When I moved my eyes to look, there was a piece of the building that collapsed on me. I was so numbed from everything that I didn't notice a piece of the building fell on top of me when I was on the ground. Brick, mortar, and wood was there and all. It felt oddly comfortable being underneath it all. It felt oddly warm, and the feeling of content welled up inside my body. To just lie here and die. THRNE dash? My mind started to drift in and out. My eyes started to feel heavy as if I couldn't keep them open any longer. Lo! I think I heard someone yelling. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me for inhaling so much smoke. Please! Is anyone still alive? No. No. That was definitely someone yelling. It was someone trying to look for survivors. He seemed so desperate to find anyone to save. But I couldn't do anything. The pile of rubble on top of me felt so heavy and my throat refused to emit anything out. Everything hurt, and I was struggling to simply survive. I wanted to scream, yell, anything, to catch his attention, that I was still alive, but I couldn't. I was so frustrated I tried willing any of my body to move. In my struggles I managed to knock a piece of brick with one of my hands onto the ground, but I doubt he heard it. With the fire raging in the background and the buildings collapsing, I doubted he would hear a small insignificant sound. My hand twitched in the air. This was all I could do. It stuck out like a grave marker. I stared upwards to the smoke-covered sky. The fires illuminating the sky. It was unnaturally beautiful. Hearing started to become difficult. Everything felt so muted. In a way it was nice. It blocked out the roaring inferno in the background, and for a moment for me, it seemingly blocked out the world, leaving me to my own thoughts in peace. But then something happened. The weight of the rubble on top of me slowly started being lifted. Bit by bit. It started feeling lighter, and I could breathe a little easier. My eyes began to focus. It was a man. By pure chance I was being saved. Alive. You're alive. Never in my entire existence have I ever seen a person this happy before. You're alive, he repeated again. This man. He looked so happy. As if his heart was being filled with so much joy. Those eyes of his tearing up as he chanted over and over, saying that I was alive. He grabbed my hand and brought it near his face. His tears dripping down on small hands. You're alive. Not too long ago I was on the doorsteps of death. But this man, seeing him in such joy and happiness, welled something up inside me. Never before have I ever been so envious of this man's looks. The sight of him being so thankful and happy that he saved someone. He grabbed my hand with both of his now. Thank you, he gratefully said. This man kept chanting thank you as he held on to me. His tears running freely down his soot and ash-ridden face as he said it over and over again. He held on to my hand, never letting go, as if afraid that if he did I would die. It was strange for me at the time. He was being grateful that he had found someone amongst all this destruction. That by saving just this one person, he had in the end saved himself. Shouldn't I be the one that's grateful for him saving me? Shouldn't I be the one elated to be saved? That I may survive and walk among the living to experience the joys of life while others perished amongst the flames to be forgotten? Later down in life, I would come to find out in a way that it was the other way around. That I in some way saved him. As if the act of saving me redeemed his actions, his life. That day, I realized what I had wanted. That I wanted to share and feel what this man was experiencing right before me. I wanted to smile just as he did. Cry the tears that ran down his face just as he did. To have my heart filled with such joy, just as he did. It was that moment that set my life on a course that I would never be able to steer away from, because in my heart, no, in my soul, that this is what I wanted to do, what I was born to be, that I wanted to save others just as how this man saved my life. That I would make sure I will save and rescue others so that I too could be filled with joy and happiness. Yes, with all my strength and will, I will save others just like him. I closed my eyes as a luminous white light filled the area, all the while I hear his sobs of joy. Later on, when I was in the hospital recovering along with the other children that had survived the fire, I saw that same man again. He was speaking with the leader of my village. He was on the ground in Siza, bowing to him as if he were begging something of him. After a few moments of mulling it over, the old man in white and red robes nodded and walked away. The man on the ground got up, tears in his eyes, but with a happy smile. It was the same thing that I wanted to see in other people. The same thing that I wanted to achieve in my life. He turned to the nurse, they conversed a few words before she nodded and walked off with a clipboard in her arms. He walked towards my bed. Hello? He nervously greets. You must be Naruto. I didn't say anything except stare at him and allowing him to continue. I suppose the direct method would be better, so I'd like to ask you, which would you prefer? Being sent back to the orphanage or be adopted by a man you've just met? I sat there for a moment taking it all in. Someone finally wanted to take me in. That I too could have a father? I crossed my arms together and closed my eyes before placing a hand on my chin, pretending I was contemplating. I grinned a little before opening one eye and pointing to him. Ha ha ha! Aren't you a little trickster? He crouched down and slid a bin out onto the open. It was my meager personal effects and belongings. I'm glad. Let's get you dressed and going right away. You're going to need to get comfortable in your new home, he said with a smile. Home. That word. I smiled. I rolled the word home a couple of times in my head to become familiar with it. That felt so good to say. Home. A home with me and my new father. I finally had a place where I could call home. Although, he started off hesitantly. I do need to tell you something. I had might as well get it off my chest and come clean. It broke my trail of thought. What was it that he was hesitant to say to me right now? Naruto, he took a breath. I tilted my head in curiosity. You see, Naruto. I am not a shinobi. Huh. It was an amazing couple of years after the disaster in the village. They were filled with some of the best memories I had with my adoptive dad. I finally knew what it was like to have a father. To have someone care for me. To have someone love me. My adoptive father and I lived in a fairly large, old building near the older northern end of Konoha. It was a Japanese-style building with a classical elegance that befitted the area. Come to think of it, I think its style was older compared to our neighbor's estate. One could say it can be considered a rare example of Konoha's architectural history. 1. It had a rather aged storehouse built on the edge of the yard, which used a key cast in an old style different from the modern ones used today and in the rest of the residence. As for the main house, it was rather open and not too large. It wasn't small either. Rather, it was just perfect and felt like a true home. We even had a building dedicated for training kendo. The yard was large enough to house a garden and spacious enough to practice Kyudo if one wanted to. Living here with my adoptive father was surreal. Although I found out he was a terrible cook. As in almost burning down the kitchen and blowing up the gas line connected to it type of terrible. We both agreed for him to never step near the kitchen and that I would handle all of the cooking from then on. I'd like to think I was a fairly good cook if by the fact that he would always praise my meals and that we would have a gluttonous guest that at first came time to time before coming over every day to snag a free meal. I never wanted this to end, but I knew that if I wanted to achieve my goal that I made for myself that night, that I would have to become strong, that I needed to gain power to save others just like my father did to me. So near the end of the second year of living with him, I asked him the question to teach me. I had hoped that he would pass on his teachings to me. That I too would gain the same abilities he had to save others. No, was the simple answer he had given me. I furrowed my eyebrows in confusion and frustration. But why? Why not? I dropped it for now, but it wasn't later on in the year that I asked him the same question again. No. How come? How come he wouldn't teach me so that I may save others as well? Please, Father. I just want to save people like how you did to me. Internally I was frustrated, but I didn't really show except furrowing my eyebrows again. He smiled and chuckled to himself before rubbing his hands on top of my blonde hair, ruffling a bit. Before going out on the porch to sit and go into deep thought as he usually would. It was several months later that I asked again. No, Naruto. 3 times I've been denied now. Why? Why was I being denied? What did I do wrong? This time I couldn't hide my frustration leaking out of me. I just wanted to help people. I did my best to be courteous, kind and welcoming to anyone that needed help around the neighborhood. I tried my hardest to be helpful to any and everyone. I know it was just for small things, it felt good to help others, but it just wasn't enough. I knew it wasn't going to be enough. Not with how I wanted to save others. I needed to be strong and powerful. My father had it. He was skilled, surely. So why wouldn't he teach me? Why? He looked at me carefully. Why won't you teach me? I just want to be strong to protect and save other people, so why won't you teach me? What's so wrong about that? I asked him sorrowfully. I was tearing up wearing my heart on my sleeve. I just wanted to help others. He stares at me before sighing. Naruto. I don't want to see you hurt. Teaching you my skills, my craft. They were meant to kill. Do you understand? Nothing more. Nothing less. They aren't meant for such a good boy like yourself. You're too good for this, Naruto. I balled my fists as we sat across from each other on the tatami mats. I still had tears dropping down from my eyes. God, I was such a little kid. I couldn't bear to look at him in such a pitiful state. What would those eyes see? A weak kid who can't help but cry because he was being denied his dreams? A petty child? I don't know. I just knew I was too much of a coward to look at him. Naruto. I was too distracted that I didn't even notice him move and seated himself beside me. No parent could ever bear to see their children hurt because of what they did. When I saved you, I vowed to never cause such atrocities ever again. Please, you must understand me. I brought my sleeves and rubbed my runny nose. I sniffled a little too before trying to compose myself a bit. Father, I said in my small voice. I promise I would use what you taught me to save others. I promise you that no matter what, I would use my powers to save others. I want everyone to be happy. I don't want to see people be sad. I would do any and everything to help them. We sat in silence for a few moments, him contemplating my words. Why? I gulped a bit. Not in nervousness, but to clear the dryness in my throat. I want to see that same smile that you had when you rescued me. My cheeks reddened a bit. It was a bit embarrassing to admit that to my father that night. Yet it felt good to freely speak from my heart. I looked at him, and he sat there in stunned silence. He gave a light chuckle before he ruffled my hair. Naruto, you saved me that one night, did you know? Closing his eyes, he gave a small pause before taking in a deep breath and exhaling. He contemplated his next words. It felt like ages before he finally opened his eyes and looked at me. Was he going to deny me again? As much as I wanted to become a savior to other people, I didn't want to disappoint or upset my father. This was the man I held in the most esteemed position. While there wasn't much on the list, he would never be topped. He saved me, don't you know? Promise me, he said quietly. My adopted father was always a soft-spoken man. Promise me that you will use my teachings to do well for this world. This was it. This was it. Elation filled my chest, and my eyes had brightened up as I looked up to him. Yes. It was finally going to start. I could finally begin to truly help people. I promise. I promise to use what you teach me and use them to save others. That's my word, and I will never go back on them. I thumped my fist against my chest, and a fire grew in my eyes that my father saw. He looked at me, studying me carefully, picking it apart piece by piece. The way I proclaimed my promise must have taken him aback. It was so passionate, so earnest. It was filled with promising innocence, one that hadn't seen or been corrupted by the cruel outside world. It was like looking at a light at the end of a dark tunnel. Simply put, it was refreshing. All right then. I shall teach you, he smiled again. I smiled back. Looking back, it was one of the many moments I cherished with my father. These were things that will never be taken away from me. That will never be forgotten. He trained me. Starting from the ground up, he taught me the basics and bare bones before leaving me to my devices. In all honesty, it didn't really feel like he was training me at first. Most of the times he sat on the porch watching me go through my katas and practicing the basic techniques, correcting me if I was performing something wrong before leaving me to my own devices and studies. It wasn't much, but I was too happy to care. I was finally starting on my path to become a savior. Over the years under his tutelage, he taught me more and more. It seemed like my adoptive father was an endless fountain of knowledge. As I grew older, his teaching fitted with my growth and he adjusted well. At times I felt like he was holding back, but would shake his head slightly. In the beginning, he taught me the foundations of what was known as ninjutsu. In all honesty, I was completely abysmal with even the basics, but he was a patient man. I would get frustrated most of the times, and my failures would only increase my impatience, leading me to rush the training or technique I would be learning. But with him, his patience sooner or later rubbed off on me, which I've been eternally grateful for. As he continued my training over the year, I noticed something off about my father. He tried his best to hide it, but I was rather perceptive and knew he was in pain. In the beginning of the year, it was just small bits of pain that he experienced. Occasional winces here and there. When we would physically train, I noticed that he would tire out fairly quickly, or that he would be drained for the entire day. I thought it was him just being sick with a common cold or something, but it progressively became worse. A lot worse. My old man was always the type of person to wake up early in the morning to start the day, but on some days he would sleep in. At first I thought he needed the rest because, come on, he was old. Alright, he wasn't even that old, more of he was around his mid-30s, but I would just joke about it to him, and he would laugh it off. But there were those days where I would come in and check on him, and he would be sweating in his sleep, face contorted into pain, and hearing his ragged breathing. I didn't know what to do. I was only 8 at the time. Was he dying? How sick was he? Should we head to the hospital and have him checked up? I had no idea what to do. At the time, I didn't realize that my adoptive father was dying. A slow and excruciatingly painful death. One that was eating him inside out. What could have caused this? Was it maybe something from the Konoha summer fire incident? But that was years ago. I was in the middle of the whole thing, and I've been fine ever since I was rescued. After catching him cough up blood one later afternoon in our training session, I confronted him about his well-being. He told me it was nothing to be worried about. But I was. How can I not worry about him? I told him we could always scale back on my training so it wasn't so taxing on him, but he shook his head. He said he would call in a few favors that some people owed him to advance my training. Besides, you've almost learned everything I have to teach you, Naruto. I think it's about time you start branching out to different studies. A few weeks later, and he going out of the house every so often while I continued my studies, I had several new teachers. One was a white-haired man that had one of his left eye covered, the second being the same purple-haired gluttonous freeloader that came to our house every day to catch a meal, and lastly a bowl-cut-haired man with the thickest pair of eyebrows I've ever seen in my life, wearing a green spandex suit with the most peculiar of personalities. We went over the training regimen together at dinner, and made sure I was fully rounded out. The guy with one eye named Kakashi would go over a rather large bulk of my training, such as speed, swordplay, techniques, tactics, tracking, and deception. The purple-haired bottomless pit named Anko would go over versatility/adaptability, environment, information gathering, perception, tolerance, and human physiology. Last but most certainly not least was the bowl-cut-haired man. This eccentric guy called Guy would be focusing on pure strength, hand-to-hand, combat/spatial awareness, endurance, and resiliency. Man, Dad must have had some serious favors owed to him if he was able to call in these people to train me. Well, okay, maybe not Anko, since all we had to do was threaten to take away her eating rights at the house. All 3 of them were fairly up there out in the world and were infamous in their own right. I was incredibly grateful to be under their tutelage. Not many people had the opportunity to be exclusively taught. Day by day, month by month, I would grow stronger and smarter every day under their watchful eyes. Day by day, month by month, my father would grow weaker and frail. I don't know how much time I have left with him. He wasn't able to walk around much without being in incredibly amounts of pain. After much arguing, I was finally able to convince him to go get checked up, but to my frustration and confusion, the medical personnel said he was perfectly fine. It was just that he was dying, plain and simple. Almost as if it were a curse upon him that was causing him to die. I needed to save my father somehow. I needed to cure him of whatever was afflicting him. He saved me 4 years ago. Now I need to save him. After my trainings, I would delve into my books, trying desperately to see if anything could heal him. I studied and studied, but there wasn't anything I could find to help him. I combed through every single library with my new technique that was taught to me by Kakashi. I broke into every medical institute to study what could be ailing my dad. I snuck into the historical record department to find out if anyone else had this affliction. Nothing. I was coming up short, and I needed to find answers fast. As time went by, it was just getting worse for him. I was getting embittered at being powerless to save him. 2 fruitless years of endlessly searching for any information to save him would finally be answered and put to rest. It was after a night of studying that I looked at my clock to see the time. 1 a.m. Sigh. I needed some fresh air. Closing my textbook and rolling up my scrolls, I got out of my room and walked to the porch where my father would sit and watch the moon time to time. As I neared the porch, I saw him sitting there facing towards the moon with his eyes closed. He almost looked at peace, as if he wasn't racked with so much pain inside of him. He must have fell asleep. He really shouldn't be out here with how frail his health is. Hey! I called to him as I sat down next to him. Hey, old man. I must have woke him up or something. You know, if you're going to sleep, you should do it in your bed and not out here. He sheepishly gives a light laugh. Right, he takes a breath. Nah, I'm fine. There's a small pause between us, with me looking at him, not really believing it. When I was little, I wanted to be a hero. Hero? What? Wasn't he already one? How could he want to be a hero when for me he was one already? You wanted to be one? Did you give up or something? Yeah. It's unfortunate, but being a hero is sort of a limited time thing. When you start growing up Naruto, it gets hard to call yourself one. I should have realized that earlier on. To me, you are a hero, Dad. You still are and always will be, but if he thinks that way, then I'll just have to become one for him then. I still had my years to use. That's just too bad then, right? Indeed, he softly spoke. You are absolutely right. He exhaled heavily before commenting on the moon. The moon looks really nice tonight. Yeah, it sure is. I looked up to the moon. If you feel like you couldn't do it, Dad, this one's for you. Since you couldn't do it, I'll do it for you. Yeah. Since you're old now, you can't do it, but I pointed at myself, can. Leave it to me, Dad. Your dream. That night I vowed to him that I would become a hero for him. That even though he wasn't able to become one, I would pick up for him in his steed. Even if it killed me, even if it broke me, I will become a hero. He sat there looking at me, jaw slightly unhinged and staring. Dad looked shocked and surprised before smiling an earnest smile. Right, he closed his eyes as if he reconciled with his past. Yes, I can be at peace now. I laid back with my arms crossed behind my head before I fell asleep. It was one of the best nights of sleep that I had gotten in a long while. I was usually stressed and worked up about training and studying to save my dad that my nightly sleeps would be fraught with nightmares and short sleeps. It wasn't till in the late morning that Anko came by that I woke up. Anko and I rubbed my eyes to wake myself up a bit. What are you doing here so early? Early? She asked in disbelief. I'll have you know it's almost noon. She tapped her imaginary watch on her wrist. What? Oh crap. I didn't mean to sleep in and Dad needs to take his meds. Crap. Like a lot of crap. I always made sure that Dad took his pills so he could at least function throughout the day on time. His first set was at 8 sharp. I must have missed it by a couple hours. Damn it. Don't worry, I'll go get Karitsuga-kun's medicines, Naru-chan. She left to go to his room to grab his medicine pouch. I noticed he didn't move or wake up. Hey old man, time to wake up and take your meds. No response. Come on old man, I know you're getting by on your years, but you're no way that old yet. Time to wake up, Dad. I clapped my hands a couple of times to get his attention. No response. Dad? I went and reached out to him. The sudden push off balanced him, and he simply tipped over on his left side. And no. Dad. I went over to his body and began futilely shaking him as if it would wake him up. Dad, please. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. I continued to shake him up. Tears were starting to form in my eyes. I didn't want to believe it. There's no way I would possibly believe it. If this is a joke, it's not funny. Dad, wake up. Come on, please. Wake up. Anko skidded to a stop down the hall, concern written all over her face. Shit, kid, what's going on? Dad, come on, please. She gathered what was going on before muttering shit a couple of times. The purple-haired woman tried moving me out the way. Come on, kid, work with me here, I need to check on your father. I held on as tightly as possible to my dad's robes. I yelled. I screamed in defiance. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't possibly be happening. How? How could this have happened? Kid, please come on, I need you to move. I wasn't listening. I was too busy crying and screaming for my father to wake up. She must have made a clone because two men came speeding in over the walls, landing in the spacious yard. Anko tried getting me away from his body. Get off me, Anko! Get off! I struggled in her grip. Kid, please, she sounded sad, but was trying her best to hide it. Calm down, please. I need you to calm down. No, stop it. Dad, come on. I kept yelling. It wasn't going to do anything, but it was all I could do. It was all anything I can do, really. Kakashi. Guy. Give me a hand over here, please, she asked them softly. My other two teachers came over and tried subduing me. I struggled over them as I tried getting near my father. Deawawawad. I kept yelling to him. I kept struggling to get to him. A part of me died that day. Yet, a part of me grew and hardened me for the world that day. Deawawawad. 8 years later. Man, what a time to be going on a memory trip. Many things have happened in the past 8 years. Many good things have occurred, but equally many bad things have happened. I secured my traveling pack around me tighter as I walked a minor trail leading me towards my next destination. I wore a simple light forest green jacket and matching pants that had dark green on some of the pockets. I had a pair of black leather gloves covering my hands and had metal-plated black shoes that were attached to my trousers. Underneath the jacket I wore a black body armor that I could materialize and dematerialize when I willed it. Over my ensemble I had my red overcoat draped over the left side of my body, effectively covering my left arm. And finally a small blue ribbon tied onto my right bicep into a neat little bow. 2. Really, of all times and places to think back, I'd have to stop there, sheesh. I scratched my head a bit. I need a vacation. I didn't exactly know where I was going on this trail, but my intuition hasn't failed me so far, and besides, something incredibly life-changing usually happens when I'm out wandering on the unbeaten path. Come to think of it, I should probably stop that since I've gotten myself into trouble that could last 1,000 lifetimes. Nah. Traveling the world wherever it took me. Helping people wherever it was needed. I gave a soft smile to myself before looking up to the canopy of the forest. I wonder, how have you been doing? Hope you've been doing well. I closed my eyes, remembering a happy memory with someone before taking a breath while continuing down the trail. Something's disturbing the air. I stopped walking. Whatever it was traveling incredibly fast and was coming straight ahead of me. Huh! I reached out and caught an animal by the scruff of its neck just as it neared me. I held it in front of my face before asking it a question. Now where are you in such a hurry, you cute little pug? I softly poked at it with my finger, playing with it. Naruto? I looked at the dog carefully again. It was a small brown pug that had an adorable little blue vest with a seal and a Konoha forehead protector wearing it like a cap. I poked at the dog some more. Packin'? What are you doing out here in the neck of the woods? I kept poking at it with my finger. It started to growl at me. If you don't stop, I'm gonna bite that digit off. I closed my eyes and smiled. How cute. This cute little pug thinks he can hurt me. Oh well, I'll play nice. So where you headed, little buddy? This was Kakashi's Niken. More important, this was the leader of his little pack of 8 dogs. Packin, despite his size, was incredibly fast, dangerously smart and perceptive, and was the perfect little thing to send information to and fro places. Kakashi's in deep trouble. A-class level bordering on S-class type of deal. Blunt and to the point. Huh, Kakashi in trouble, eh? I think I got time to help. Alright, why then? Tell me where he is and I'll go pay him a visit and see what I can do to help. I sounded chipper. I think the last time I saw or spoke to Kakashi was well over 4 years ago before I started off on my travels around the world. You're gonna need to get there fast, Naruto. This is serious. Geez, what a killjoy. I had the odd sensation just to mess with the pug in my hands. Fine. Fine. Hold on tight, you. I gathered chakra into my legs, bent my knees a bit, and leaned forward. Bright blue lines traced down my leg almost like a circuit. An abhorrent amount of it. There were better and a lot more efficient ways to travel great distances in short amounts of time, but just for this one instance, I was going to mess with this cute little pug. Naruto, don't you dare, he said warily. I smiled innocently. You said we need to get there fast. So we're going to get there fast. With the force of 1,000 tons of bomb, I released all the chakra that I was gathering in my legs before being blasted off towards the general direction of Kakashi, leaving behind a giant baseball field-sized crater a dozen or so more meters deep in my wake. Naruto. Oh yes, indeed there were better ways to travel fast, but where was the fun in that? Chapter 2, A Hero and His Tale. Hatake Kakashi. The man who copied 1,000 techniques. The son of the legendary White Fang and student of the heroic Yondaime Hokage. Inheritor of the copy wheel eye and infamous XANBU captain that ruthlessly cut down hundreds of men. Wanted to just tear his hair out and bash his head against a wall. By the gods, teenagers are absolutely annoying, the man thought. Take a team, they said. It'll be fun, they said. You'll grow to love them, they said. Kakashi had 2 words for them: bull. Shit. Why? 1. He didn't take a team. It was forced upon him. It was either take a team or take a nasty probation. 2. It was not fun at all playing as an overglorified babysitter. 3. He did not love them at all. Nor was he getting close to even like them. Not even tolerate. Actually, maybe the pink-haired one showed promise, but she needed some serious help to grow out of her shell. Hatake Kakashi liked to do things on his terms. If he found it likable and suited to his tastes and whims, then he was 1,000 times more amicable to be with. But this was just ridiculous. He cursed the way things were being ran back home. Nothing had been the same with the administration ever since the right-wing politicians started expanding their outreach. Seriously, what the hell? Last he remembered on how they ran things was that it was akin to a military dictatorship. The head honcho Hokage had the first, middle, and last words on how things ran. Sighing heavily, he rubbed the sides of his head to alleviate the building headache. His body was incredibly sore and beaten from having to not only fend off not 1, but 2 A-rank rogue agents. And they weren't just some run-of-the-mill A-rankers. These 2 were from that damned 7 swordsman group from Kiri. His students, while full of talent, were absolutely useless against 2 rogue agents that had experience that counted not in years, but decades against them. Hell, one of them had a legend and infamy that was comparable to him, and the other wasn't too far behind either. He should have overrode their stupid, silly democratic vote and ordered them to turn around when they had the chance. Being in the military didn't mean you had civil rights. They specifically took that away from you to ensure shitty dumb situations like this didn't happen. But they were so goddamn determined to chase after some dumb glory when it presented itself to say that they saved a whole country after hearing that old bridge builder's plight. He played the routine sob story and even had the gall to bring out pictures of his family. God, he even pulled out the oldest trick in the book talking about his daughter and grandson suffering. Hook, line, and sinker. Thinking back, he palmed his face and groaned a bit. The white-haired shinobi leaned back, allowing his head to audibly thunk against the wooden poster board on his bed. The only person really that deserves to play their hero theatrics is him, and he's nowhere near here. He may have lost contact with his first pupil, but he sure as hell kept track with his exploits across the world. He huffed an amused laugh. That kid really did go out and tried to be a hero after having a crash course introduction into the shinobi system. In all honesty, he still had trouble believing it himself, even though he was a witness to it all. 1 year. In 1 year he sat the academy entrance exam in the village, graduated to Genin, promoted to Chunin, and finally rocketed to Jonin. In 1 year. He allowed himself a small smile. I'm a damn good teacher if I don't say so myself. While there were 3 others that also taught him. He took up the bulk of his training and crammed every single bit of information he could into that blonde numbskull. He didn't pull a single of his punches or held back in anything. Under his tutelage he expected not a 100%, but a 110%. Every day he would push into his limits, and after they were at his threshold, and he couldn't go any further, they would expand that and keep forging on. It was merciless, cruel, and unforgiving. In fact, to be honest, that wasn't his intention at all at first, but rather was asked of him by Kiritsugu. He asked the 3 of them to be unforgiving when they trained his adopted son. He wanted to make sure they taught him life lessons in a controlled environment. At times he himself would be hesitant on how far he could push the boundaries, but the talks and glances by the man dispelled any thoughts about going light. Although after he had passed away from his illness, the kid practically threw himself into his work and studies. Eat, sleep, study, train, and rest. Repeat. Day in, day out. If he were honest now that he was thinking back on it, it was scary how fast he was growing at an unprecedented pace. Comparing to him? He who graduated the academy at a mere age of 5, became Chunin at 6 and then Jonin at 8. Granted, he himself had an early start to his career. Naruto simply plowed through it all within a year. Could have been in Black Ops and maybe even captain of a squad within the next if he wanted to, he mused. But he didn't. After being promoted to Jonin, he applied for a traveling license on par with one of the legendary 3 ninja. He didn't know the full story of how he got it, but he did, and like a magician, disappeared. Well, in the physical sense of disappearing, that is. To those who actually carefully paid attention to world current events and had contacts in the underworld. He was making a name for himself wherever he went. Apparently it didn't matter where he traveled in the world, as he had no set compass. North, east, south, west. He went up to the frozen lands of the land of snow, to the blistering hot and unforgiving sands of the land of winds, across the globe to the land of demons. For a good while he orbited the land of fire and the smaller nations surrounding it before crossing the harrowing seas of the south, going past the waters controlled by the hidden mist. When he said he traveled everywhere, he traveled everywhere. Kakashi made a mental note to find out how could Naruto travel across the globe so often and quickly. He traveled the globe for 3 years, pulling off his heroic antics of saving anyone that could be saved. For 3 years he traveled the world, saving towns, villages, and hell, even countries. His name was spoken with renown to those who knew of his feats. They treated him like a saint, with such reverence that he wouldn't have been surprised if people worshipped him like a god. Everywhere that he had been present they referred to him as a hero. Everyone that he had spoken with or heard of spoke about him as if he was a living messiah. Kakashi smiled to himself. God damn, was he good or was he good? But after 3 years of non-stop activity saving people left and right, he had upped and disappeared. For about a year no one knew where he went. What had happened to him? He simply vanished into thin air. His meager reports that he would send every once and a while stopped completely. It had unsettled him. Such a person like Naruto, who was so active in those 3 years and suddenly not be operating anymore, unnerved him. Merchants, travelers, and tourists alike that had been saved by him or heard of his accomplishments still talked about him greatly. There was just no new exploits being talked or gossiped about. After a while it was just listening to the same old same old. At one point he even considered applying a traveling permit himself to go back out into the world and hopefully find him somehow. He softly sighed. He was starting to think too much again. Where is my damn book? Without his book to preoccupy his mind when he wasn't really doing anything tended to let him recollect his thoughts and memories, and for him, he'd rather not, since it came with a basket full of problems. Psyche problems that he was supposed to be checked up on, but skipped out since he couldn't really care too much about them. He had better things to do anyways besides sitting in some stuffy room talking to someone about his problems and droning on and on about how he could fix it. Yeah. No thanks. Glancing at the clock, he read it was almost 6. Shit. How long has he been up just reminiscing and thinking to himself? Kakashi clicked his tongue and sighed. This was the reason why he constantly read his book over and over. Moving the covers off of him, he grabbed his nearby crutch to help support him as he was still recovering from the fight yesterday. Hopefully Pakken can reach to Konoha in a couple of days and reinforcements can arrive within the week. He didn't want to risk it. This was beyond their scope. Hell, even beyond his. So he had sent his summoned pet to travel as quickly as possible to the Hokage's office 2 days ago. He should be over halfway there. It was his own estimation on how long it would take for the wielders of the legendary head cleaver and lightning swords to fully recover. It doubled as his own guess as to how long it would be for him to recuperate as well. If he were honest, it had been some time that he had to exert himself this much, and after they survived he was going to condition himself back up to an appropriate level of readiness. Hopefully he wasn't wrong. He needed that time to cram any semblance of survival skills into these brats called his students if they all wanted to make it out alive. Throwing on his usual ensemble, he shuffled out of his room to wake up his team. Checking on the room with the pink-haired medical trainee student first, he knocked on her door before hearing a pair of feet shuffle to the door and opening it. She was already up and ready to go. Good. Sakura-san, head on downstairs and get some breakfast. We'll be heading out to do some drills as soon as I wake your other teammates up. The pink kunoichi bowed slightly before gathering her equipment and heading to the kitchen. Thank goodness for small favors that out of the 3 of his students, she was the one that listened well and wasn't a problem. Now he had to wake the 2 most troublesome bunch of his team. Limping lightly over to their room, he rapped on the door with his knuckles lightly. No response. He knocked again with more force. The masked shinobi rolled his eyes. All right then, polite way done and failed. Time to just barge in and wake their damn asses up. Opening the door up, his nose was immediately assaulted by a wave of a long night of lovemaking. Kakashi audibly groaned in disgust and dissatisfaction. How unprofessional of them. On the bed he sighted the 2 18-year-old lovers cuddled up underneath the blankets nude. Their clothes strewn about haphazardly around the room and their gear left on the table in the middle of the room. Subconsciously his right eye started twitching uncontrollable. How? Absolutely unprofessional. Using his crutch he flipped the table over that had their gear piled on top of it, causing a loud crash to resound in the quiet house, waking up all of its occupants. That was enough to cause the 2 to jolt from their blissful sleep. Get up. Downstairs. Now, he curtly said before he slammed the door closed to head downstairs himself. Damn hormonal teenagers. Damn the stupid council forcing upon him a damn team. And damn himself for being an idiot. He wasn't being paid enough to be a goddamn overgrown babysitting yes man. He gave a small groan as he realized what he had been turned into. A goddamn yes man. This utterly infuriated him. At training he was going to grind their asses into the ground to vent for making him put up with this. Slowly he descended and found Sakura reading a medical manual while eating a bowl of oats. Good, he thanked himself again for small favors that there was at least one member in this team he could rely on to be a model shinobi. Good morning, Sakura. He cheerfully greeted while giving her his usual eye smile and wave. He feigned a peppy attitude, but he could tell she didn't bought it at all, considering not too long ago he was emanating some killer intent and was oozing out annoyance from his body. She nodded back. Good morning, sensei. What are we doing today? Let's just wait for your 2 teammates to get down, and then I'll explain so I don't have to repeat myself. Sitting down at the table he grabbed an apple before quietly munching on a light breakfast consisting of varied fruits. They weren't exactly fresh, but he had had worse before. It wasn't long before he heard the last 2 members of the team coming down the stairs, a boy and a girl. Glad of you 2 to finally join us for breakfast, he gave them a smile to try and annoy them. You 2 must have had a good night's rest, didn't ya? Everyone knew what he was talking about. It wasn't exactly subtle, to be fair. TCH, none of your business, the boy sneered. Now this rude little snot named Tsubasa Daisuke looked like a bona fide punk. No, seriously, he looked like a punk and he fit the part as well. Average length black hair that came down to his shoulders almost, stood around 5 foot and 10 inches, 2 bangs that framed his face, green eyes, piercings on his ears, 5 in total on each ear, and 1 small lip ring. In his opinion, a very punch-worthy face. "Ugh, why are we up so early?" said the girl next to him. And that was what the village considered to be the last Uchiha. Uchiha Sasuke. Funnily enough, she had a male's name. Named after the Sandame's father Sarutobi Sasuke. Apparently the parents assumed it was going to be a boy, and when they found out it was a girl, went through with it anyways. A fair complexion, onyx eyes, raven-colored hair that framed her face, and the rest pulled into a simple messy ponytail. An Uchiha princess indeed. "I've recovered enough that we will be upping your training and preparing you all for the next eventual counter with Momochi Zabuza, Kurasuke Raiga, and the third unknown shinobi that assisted them. Finish up your breakfast quickly and let's go. We're strapped for time as is, so we can't waste a single minute of the free time we have left." Their rut from last night must have made them a lot more subdued as they complied without complaint, and before Kakashi knew it they were out in the nearby clearing, with a perfect line of sight of the house, running drills as a team and training their collective asses into the ground. Most of the training consisted of countering the 2 Miss Swordsman's swordplay, and surviving the first 30 seconds of the fight. The other part of the training he was cramming in was bolstering the team into quickly eliminating the unknown third shinobi out of the picture as soon as the fight started before coming in for support against Kurasuke and Momochi. He also included in some one-on-one sparring sessions against him. At first they were unsure since he was restricted to crutch, but he waved them off, saying even with his current condition, it would be more than enough against them. That triggered 2 out of the 3 students. The dark-haired teen immediately rising up to the challenge after being considered too weak even against the cripple. The veteran shinobi merely smiled as the hot-headed teen easily took the bait. It was so easy to rouse some of them up. Inflict a little damage on their pride. Make some offhand comments about them not being strong enough, and voila! Instant gratification with a simple old-school beatdown disguised as training. Let it be known that Hatake Kakashi was not above to being petty and childish. He thoroughly enjoyed the ensuing rounds of fighting and beating them down, though he did pull his punches on Sakura as she wasn't the cause of his ire. After an hour or more he quickly became tired of manhandling them into the dirt. Although he never knew that Daisuke's voice could go so high-pitched after a few well-placed hits with his crutch. Music to his sadistic ears. He made sure to constantly remind them that these were all lessons. Half-truths in all honesty, but no one has to know. Getting all his pent-up stress out of his body with a thorough beatdown on his students, Kakashi had the team resume squad exercises to counter the 3 rogue shinobi. Meanwhile he would watch and mull over the situation some more. It was evident that he himself could hold the 2 off for a limited amount of time since he survived getting ambushed by them several days ago. All of it came down to those 3 students of his killing off the other support shinobi and then ganging up on Kurasuke since he was deemed the weakest compared to Momochi. Although this was all precautionary, rather an insurance plan if the reinforcements from Konoha didn't make it in time, or if they would get any at all. Kakashi checked the time and saw they were nearing noon. Almost time for a break and the bridge builder to get to work. He waved over his team calling for a break. They all looked so tired already, and the day had only just begun too. Tazuna will be heading out onto the bridge soon. We'll continue some basic exercises while on the bridge. Please pay attention to anything that might crop up and be noteworthy. We don't know if there will be any enemy reinforcements, so keep your eyes peeled. His daughter and grandson will be at the bridge with us before heading out into the town's market. Sakura, you'll be their escort for the day. After the day is done, we'll have some night exercises before calling it at around 10. Understood? They all nodded. Good. He didn't have to hear a snarky comment from the other 2. One would pipe up and the other would follow, and that was extremely irritating. All right, he clapped his hands and smiled. Let's head back and grab some lunch. He stopped before turning to his right. Was that Pakin's chakra signature? What was he doing back so soon already? Did something happen? And why was he at full speed running? Not a second later, the leader of his dog pack came bursting out of the foliage looking as if he saw a ghost. Huh. That wasn't good. Packin'? What are you doing back? What happened? Was there an ambush? The pug panted a bit before straightening himself out, looking dead serious. Something definitely important must have happened for him to turn around and head back to him. Kakashi, you're not going to believe who I ran into. Huh? Oh. In a fraction of a second, I leapt somewhere from the land of fires straight to the land of waves somewhere in the water near this massive bridge that was being built to connect the island and mainland together. Man, that was awesome! I laughed. Haven't done that in a while. I looked down to see how the pug was doing and saw him feebly trying to gnaw my right arm off. Naruto, you absolute prick! What the hell was that? It said with its mouth clamped onto my right arm, still biting. It didn't even hurt. Was he trying? It's like he didn't even have any teeth. I smiled and gushed a bit at the pug. Gosh darn, it was so cute. I poked at the lovable pug a couple of times. I mean, you said we had to get there fast, so we got here fast. I gave it a cocky grin. I waved my right arm back and forth and saw him sway as he gripped tighter, not wanting to fall into the water. Ridiculously cute. I wonder if Kakashi would let me keep him as my pet. I'll let you off once we get to the island, and you can go report back to Kakashi. Messing with the pug just one more time, I gathered only a small fraction of chakra into my legs before disappearing in a burst of speed, leaving behind a large wave in my afterblast. Naruto, will you quit that? It was gripping my right arm with all its might in fear it would fall off. It was all wet. It made him look 1,000 times cuter. Yep. I'm definitely asking if I could keep him as my pet. Plucking him off my arm, I set him down on the ground. Off you go now, I shoot him. Go tell Kakashi I'm his backup. You're not coming? He shook the water off on his fur, causing his large ears to flop around. Kakashi wouldn't be mad if I stole him, would he? Nah, I'm going to walk around and see how things are around here. I'll be in the middle of the town, so it won't be too hard to find me. Alright, I'll go tell Kakashi. He ran off to go back to his master in a surprising burst of speed. Huh! Must be excited to tell Kakashi I'm still kicking. Tightening my pack, I headed off in the direction of the town from the road. It didn't take long before I was in the town, taking everything in. It was a rather small town that had a river splitting the town into two parts. On one side there was the market and residential area, and on the other side had where I guess were the administration and business buildings at. Right smack dab in the middle was a decently tall tower that towered over everything else, that also served as a bridge connecting the two sides. Too bad it wasn't high enough to really get a decent look at everything from above. As I walked around, I noticed more and more of these people were in poverty. Mothers and children begging on the street for any money. Some of the kids in the alleyways were digging up trash to find any scraps to eat. I frowned, being visibly displeased. Wasn't this supposed to be a well-off country? This was a major staging area and trade route, so everyone should have been well off, but here everyone was dirt poor and barely surviving by the looks of it. Markets should be bustling, traders trading, children running around happily, and in general livelier. Instead, it was just dead, poor, gloomy, and depressing. What happened here? My heart wrenched as I came across a little girl on the ground crying. She looked so malnourished, as if she hadn't eaten in a while. Where were her parents? Did she have any relatives? She looked so dirty as well, with her matted chestnut hair and grime on her body. The girl looked like she was around 8 years old. I couldn't really tell. Unconsciously, my hands balled into a fist. Before I could go up to her, I felt someone tug on the left side of my red shroud. It was another girl that looked similar to the one crying in front of me. Was this her older sister? Definitely looked like it, since she was in her teens, probably around 13 or 14. And Mr. DDUH have anything to eat? She nervously asked. I crouched down to her level before smiling and unslinging my pack. Don't worry, I said softly to her. I got something for you and your little sister. Rummaging through my pack, I fished out a scroll, unfurling it, and unsealing a neatly packed pack of hot rice. I usually kept stores of food on me for instances like this. I've gone through so many villages and towns encountering starving people throughout my travels over the years that I had become better prepared. The next one never made it any easier. It always broke my heart seeing innocent people, children especially, suffering. Children should be more worried about what their friends are up to or when they'll get to play, not worrying about what's going to be their next meal, or how they're going to survive the next day. This was the first time I had ever encountered anything like this in an area that was relatively peaceful. The only times there were this large amount of people in poverty like this were either oppressed or refugees from a neighboring country. These people definitely weren't refugees since near the southern hemisphere they were focused on trade and fishing. So what happened here that made this little region so poor? It definitely wasn't the administration nor business area, as they were definitely just as run down and in disrepair like the other side of town. Business must have upped and left as soon as whatever happened, and the administration was probably kicked out as it looked like a ghost town. So it's probably an outside group that came in and exploited this place. Almost every street, almost every corner I saw a kid or a family begging for money or scraps of food. They were just everywhere too, everywhere I turned, everywhere I looked it was just more and more of these people. I started grinding my teeth a bit. Whoever was doing this was looking to have their head on a pike soon. Pushing aside my thoughts for a moment, I pocketed the scroll and slung my pack over my shoulder. "Is that your little sister over there?" I pointed with the pack of steaming rice before giving it to her. She nodded as she was shocked that someone would be caring enough to even give her food. I ruffled her hair a bit. "Come on, let's go share some with your sister, hmm?" We walked over to where her sister was before I kneeled in front of the crying child. Laying my stuff down, I did my best to calm down the sobbing little girl. "Sure, there," I softly said. "Look at what your big sister brought." She sniffled a bit before looking up at me and her sister. "Owani-chan?" The elder sister looked at me again with the parcel of food in her hands as if not believing me I was actually giving it away for free. I huffed a small laugh before closing my eyes, giving her a smile to go ahead. "Why, yes. Mr. W was kind enough to give us some of his food." She sat down next to her sister before opening up the parcel to eat and share between each other. They carnivorously devoured the package of rice, cleaning up every bit of rice that was in the package. I kneeled beside them, providing some comfort and a sense of security. Rummaging again through my pack, I brought out a blanket and wrapped it around them. Looking around, I scanned the crowd looking for any familiar faces that could be related to the children, but found none in the immediate area. "Oh, our parents died not too long ago." "Huh?" I looked back at them, and the elder sister was giving most of the rice to her younger sibling. Sacrifice. She sacrificed her own needs for her little sister to regain her own strength. That she would struggle in pain and suffering just to make sure her sibling wouldn't have to. This was a lot worse than I had thought. Oppression definitely, and had the means to make sure there was no communications going in and out of this island. That meant that whoever was controlling this island knew what they were doing and were performing with extreme efficacy. I frowned. "I'm sorry to hear." She looked downtrodden before introducing herself. "Shirley. My name is Shirley." "One. That's a beautiful name, Shirley-san. What about your little sister?" "Yoshino." It was the little sister that spoke up. "Well then, Shirley and Yoshino. My name is Naruto. It's nice to meet you both." I smiled. Thank you, Naruto. Not many people would bother to help two street rats like us. We're sorry for being a burden on you, Naruto-san." What was she apologizing for? "No. It's not a problem, Shirley. You, Shirley, can't be serious about apologizing to me for helping you too." They both giggled at my pun with her name. "I wish there were more people like you," she said softly. "It's horrible here. The people are mean and they haven't let anyone off the island in years. Ever since they came and took over, everything has been terrible." "In years? Total isolation for years? A major trading station with none of its people ever leaving the island? That can't be possible." Who did this?" "Gato." It was another person that interjected behind me. "Gato Shipping Industries. One of the largest shipping companies in the world was doing this, huh?" I stood up and faced towards the speaker. "Who are you?" "I'm one of the people helping to build that bridge connecting this island and the mainland." Jichi, he introduced. It was a relatively elderly man. Probably in his mid-50s, black eyes and shaggy gray hair. Naruto. Just a person looking to help. He regarded me for a moment before speaking. Not many people, let alone traveling strangers, stop and help the kids out on the street. Not many people are me, I countered. Fair enough, he conceded. We don't get very many visitors here except those new people my boss hired to protect him. He must be referring to Kakashi, and it seems like he brought a couple others along as well. Well, that answered that question of what he was doing all the way out here. Didn't really peg him to be the type to go out of his way and be rebellious to save this land. Pretty sure there were regulations and a bunch of other bureaucratic red tape and military guidelines to prevent active personnel like him to liberate a country. Could you describe them for me? The old man scrunched his eyes to try and remember. Well, there's this one white-haired guy, a couple of teens, a male that had dark hair, two females as well, one had black hair and the other with pink hair. Did the guy with white hair have only one eye? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yep. He had a genin team with him. I wonder what made him want to go and teach again. Pretty sure last time I spoke to him about ever taking on people to train that he would rather burn his book collection himself than submit himself to babysitting teenagers. I clicked my tongue. Those were questions for later, but for now I was going to further my investigation. Draw out individuals that had ties with Gato by drawing attention to myself. By disturbing the status quo in the area, I was positive that a couple of them would be curious to come in and investigate. Painting myself as the target would be easy enough since I didn't look like anyone in the area and I had a sense no one would be stupid enough to do such a stunt except for the bridge builders. They were already putting their necks out there, but I had a sneaking suspicion that Gato was only allowing the bridge to be completed so that he could take over and have another monopoly. The builders would only be spared until the final moments of completion. He would gain another mode of transportation to deal his goods without spending a single yen. It was a genius plan that would provide a lot of profit to bolster his company, but it dealt a lot of bad to the people who lived here and called it their home. TCH. Typical business tycoons looking to exploit anyone and everything to make a profit and expand their wealth. Naruto and I-san? The little sister broke me out of my thoughts. Kneeling back down to get to her level, I smiled. Yes? Do you have any more food? As if perfectly timed, her little stomach growled in hunger. Why, Yoshino? You shouldn't ask him any more. He already gave us food. She turned towards me to apologize. I'm sorry for my sister, please don't. I laughed before waving her off. Don't worry, I got enough, trust me. I winked at her. She blushed. Getting up, I turned towards Jichi. You got any equipment that I can use to cook? He pondered for a moment. Yeah, down by the central markets. Some of the stuff that got abandoned when it was getting bad should still be here. Why? I'm going to cook for everyone. What? You can't be serious. There's not enough supplies to do so, and the amount of commotion that you'd cause would surely catch the attention of Gato's men and you'd get hurt. I waved my hand as if smacking his words out of the air. Don't worry about me, I can take care of myself. As for the supplies, I got everything I need to feed everyone. You're asking to get hurt if not killed, kid, the old man sighed. Why? Why do this for strangers and people you barely know? I looked at him straight in the eyes. Because it is the right thing to do. I will save everyone in this town from that man. I promise you. My words visibly stunned him. I'm guessing he never came across anyone with this much conviction before. He looked conflicted before resigning in defeat. All right, I'll take you over to the area. Just keep it down before you cause any trouble, please. I smiled before turning to the two girls. You two are coming with me. I smiled. You'll be the first ones to eat. Both of their jaws were unhinged slightly as if in disbelief. I nodded to them in confirmation and to encourage them to come with me. Shirley nodded before getting up, but her younger sister had a little trouble getting up and let alone walking. I shifted my travel pack to where I was carrying it in front before asking the younger sister if she would like me to give her a piggyback ride. She smiled. I loved it when other people smiled. It was such a beautiful thing to see when other people were happy. It was that for which I fought for, to see others in happiness and joy. Securing her on my back, we followed Jichi to the area. It was a decently sized marketplace. I imagined it back during its heyday that it was bustling and vibrant, but now it was almost like a ghost town. I saw the cooking equipment that hadn't been used in a while. Good. Time to kick off step 1 of my plan and cause a scene to draw whoever were acting as Gato's suppression force out here and see what they looked like. Kakashi-sensei weighed up for us. Hatake Kakashi was speeding as fast as he could with his crutch. Naruto is here? He's here on this island? At first he didn't believe it, but the way that Pakken said it gave it all more credence that he was here. What were the chances of Pakken coming across Naruto? What were the chances that he would be picked up again of all times? He counted his stars and thanked the gods for his luck. Why are we in such a rush, and who the hell is this Naruto? Said Daisuke. You'll see, come on, we have to get there fast. I doubled my speed to get to the town. What would he look like after all these years? Why did he disappear last year and decide to pop up out of nowhere? Where has he been after all this time? There was just so many questions that were being thrown around his head that he didn't notice they reached the town proper. He took note that there was something going on at the central market. Could it be Naruto? Stay close, let's stay out of sight and see what's going on, he ordered. Sensei, what the hell is going on? I said, shut it, Tsubasa. He sneered before falling in line. Team 7 ghosted over to the marketplace, staying in the shadows to quietly spectate the scene with a growing crowd. As they got closer, a savory, appetizing scent assaulted their noses. Nearing the marketplace on the rooftops, they witnessed a large crowd surrounding one individual that had a mop of spiky blonde hair and had a red overcoat that was draped over on his left. Was he cooking and feeding these people? He looked again. Yes. Yes, he was. Signaling his team to observe and wait, he looked on in wonder. What was he trying to achieve by causing a ruckus? He was intentionally ruining the status quo of having these people oppressed and weak. He's trying to bait out Gato's men. In a way, it was smart and straightforward. He would be able to identify the level of threat that these people were going up against, and who Gato generally employed to carry out his orders. His summon had already explained the 3 rogue agents, so Naruto probably took it from there, and deduced what Gato had for a general force. It wasn't long before a group of 5 men came in looking to break up whatever festivity was occurring. Oi! What the hell is going on here? The thug yelled. Everyone froze and quieted. Anyone wanna explain, huh? He unsheathed his katana and brandished it. Any of you shit-stains wanna start talking? The crowd shuffled before parting, allowing the group to view Naruto at the center of it all. He wiped his hands on a cloth before sliding on his gloves. Kakashi took a moment to observe him intently. There was something red that covered his right hand up to until his fingers. He couldn't quite catch what it was, but stored it for later. That would be me, Naruto coolly said as he walked up to them. Who the fuck are you? Do you work for Gato? He asked quickly. Answer my questions, ya? Before we fucking gut ya, he threatened. A mere traveler. The lead thug was getting annoyed by how he was gnashing his teeth. You fucking deaf? I'm a long way from being deaf, just as you are a long way from having any semblance of intelligence. This insult pushed the thug over the edge. Keijin. Keiko. Got this little shit. The 2 that were closest to Naruto pulled out their katana and swung at their target. Quicker than anyone could follow, Naruto halted their attack by simply grabbing the blades and squeezed down, causing the swords to screech and groan. This caused the crowd to gasp behind him and the thugs to take a step back. What poor quality of blades you have there, he coolly noted, eyeing all of Gato's thugs. You know, if I simply applied a little bit of pressure here, the blades will simply. The blades groaned even more under protest from his hands. Snap. At that, he snapped the blades as if they were twigs before taking a step forward, twirling the broken blades in his hands into a reverse grip, and stabbing the 2 thugs in the back straight into their heart, causing them to fall face forward. As shit. The other 2 drew their katana as well, rushing towards him from his left and right. They both swung at the same time before they too had been stopped by his hands. He snapped their blades just like before, throwing the broken blades into their throats and lodging them into their neck. They feebly grabbed at their throats before collapsing on their knees and falling forward, choking on their own blood. Naruto looked on smoothly, as if he casually removed 4 men by using their own blades against them. Walking calmly over the bodies, he stopped a few paces in front of the lead thug. "Go ahead and run," he pointed towards behind him with his chin. "Go on and tell Gato what had happened here. Tell him I did this, and it was me alone." The foul-mouthed lowlife looked like he was about to piss his pants in fear. "Don't even bother to try and mess with the townspeople. He can bring it up with me and me only. Tell him he's going to need more than simple low-life banters like you to do anything worthwhile." He started to take a couple steps back as Naruto spoke to him. You'll pay for this. Gato'll have your fucking head." Naruto waved his words off and rolled his eyes. He lost the amount of times that someone said that they'll have their revenge and his head as they ran off. Honestly, could they be a little bit more original at least? It's like they all took their cues and lines from a standard bad guy handbook on how to be extremely evil and generic. Then again, their intelligence were generally all the same, so there was that. Yes. I've heard this 1,000 times now. Now shoo! Go! Naruto shooed him off with his hand. He sounded completely disinterested. "Get on out of here and back to Gato." He placed a hand on his hip and casually watched as the guy ran for his dear life. Kakashi blinked. So that was Naruto, huh? Well, he's certainly grown and has a whole new personality to boot. Gone is the cute little kid that I was teaching not too long ago. The crowd was stunned into silence that someone had not only stood up to Gato's men, but also ruthlessly dispatched them with 0 effort. He had made it look so easy too. The hero that stood before them scratched his head and looked around at the 4 bodies. "Ah geez, I didn't really mean to kill them. Crap." He audibly sighed to himself. "Really, I wanted to scare them off, but they had to be tough and pull out their crappy excuse of a sword on me." He turned towards the crowd before bowing. "Sorry that you all had to see that. Please forgive me." He clapped his hands together as if praying. They all stared at him for a moment in silence before one of them spoke up. "What do you mean? You're our hero, you dummy. You saved us." It was the little girl Yoshino that spoke up. Everyone shared their sentiments with the little girl. It had been so long since anyone stood up to Gato and his men that they relished what happened before them. That those thugs were recompensed with their own medicine. "Why, yeah. You saved us from them. You're a hero." More and more started to stand up for him. Just like that, the floodgates were released and people began praising him for his actions. They all swarmed around him wanting to be closer to their savior. Their hero. They wanted to reassure him that what he did wasn't wrong or anything. That it was merely justice served that had been a long time coming. Naruto gave them all a solemn smile. "Thank you, everyone." He balled his right hand into a fist before placing it on top of his heart. "I swear to you all that I will do everything I can to free you all from Gato." He said it so resolutely everyone was hooked on his words. "With all the power that I have, you all will be freed and receive justice for what he has done to each and every single one of you. For this you have my word. And I never go back on my word." Kakashi smiled. Hero Naruto indeed. He really did become a hero of justice. For him it felt like it wasn't that long ago a 9-year-old kid spouting off that he would become a hero of justice for the people. That he would try his hardest to save any and everyone if possible. It was time to greet an old student. He motioned for his team to follow behind him before he jumped down onto the street behind Naruto, where he gave his impassioned speech. "Long time no see, Naruto-kun." I turned around, hearing a familiar voice that I haven't heard of in years. There before me, with a crutch on one side, his gravity-defying white hair, that goofy-looking eye smile, with his same old mask, his same old forehead protector covering his Sharingan eye, and his same old hand wave. I guess things don't really change too much, don't they? Indeed, long time no see, sensei. I smiled fondly. It wasn't too long ago I was under his tutelage. What brings you here to the neck of the woods, huh? Ha, well, there's been something going on in the grapevine that some kid was spouting of that he wanted to be a hero of justice in town, so I thought I might as well check it out. Maybe make sure he didn't hurt himself and do anything stupid, he quipped. What can I say? I had a loud mouth back then, I admitted. Hey, he got me there. I was a loud brat back then, spouting off that I'd be a hero. You still reading those crappy porn novels? I countered. You betcha. As if on cue, he whipped out his porn novel. Would you like me to recite a couple verses? They're awfully descriptive and wonderfully steamy. My right eye twitched. Him and his shitty erotic novels. Seriously, who would read that? Oh wait. Kakashi. Yeah, I'll have to pass on that. Plus there's kids. I jerked a thumb back at the crowd behind me that was slowly dispersing. Wouldn't want to ruin someone's ears at hearing a horribly written novel. Kakashi gasped as if visibly hurt. You hurt me, Naruto. He shook his head as if he was still schooling me all those years ago. Looks like I still have to teach you a couple things about manners and respecting your elders. We both went silent before I grinned and walked up to him, reaching in for a hug. Come here, Kakashi, it's been too long since I've seen you, and boy do we have some catching up to do. He returns the hug fondly. Yeah, it sure has been too long. We parted and I noticed his team standing behind him. I took stock of this team he has, looking over their faces and memorizing them in my head. One was a cute girl with pink hair, fair skin, and green eyes. She wore a red top, a band on her arm with the red cross signifying she was a medic, wore her forehead protector to hold her hair, black gloves, low heel, calf-high boots, black shorts underneath a short gray apron skirt, and gray elbow protectors. Not bad, though she looked really nervous and a bit shy. The next one was a guy, and he looked incredibly annoyed for some reason. More so when he looked at me. Did I do something? He had his standard forehead protector above his brow, a black body mesh serving as an undershirt with a dark gray short-sleeved, high-collar shirt, and gray pants that were tucked into calf-high sandals. He caught me looking at him before sneering and buffing up. Seriously, what did I do? I merely raised an eyebrow before moving on to the last member of the team. She was quite the looker, to be honest. Black eyes, around 5 feet give or take a few inches, fairly long raven hair that was tied up into a ponytail, and had 2 bangs that framed her. She wore a dark gray zippered, high-collared, short-sleeved shirt that was unzipped halfway, showing off a generous amount of cleavage, a pair of blue wrist warmers, and tight dark blue pants with a blue cloth that acted like a skirt that had a red rope tied around her waist. Tucked in behind her was a chikudo, roughly about 2.5 foot or so. A fellow practitioner of the sword, eh? I gave it a good look, storing it in my mind for later to try out. I wonder if she's any good as her with a sword. Though I doubted it. There were very few people in this world that could match her swordsmanship. Not even the 7 swordsmen of the mist could match her. Even if they did a 7-on-1, I could safely say she would carve straight through them without a sweat. What are you staring at? She jeered at me, crossing her arms in front of her chest. Seriously, why is he staring at me? Not like he's cute or hot or anything. Though with a slight admission to herself, he definitely was a looker. He was different from a lot of the guys from back home. In both looks and stature. His whole form had a warm welcoming. Like a hug from a loving father after a long and trying day. He had a soft smile that was rested on his face with the bluest of eyes that she had ever seen. They seemed so welcoming and peaceful, yet full of understanding and knowledge. As if he had experienced many battles and trials to become what stood before her. And he was tall, a good head and shoulders above even her teacher Kakashi, probably around 6 foot if not a little higher. Daisuke stepped in front of her possessively. You checking her out? Too bad she's taken, so back off, buddy. I raised an eyebrow. I couldn't help but snort derisively before closing my eyes and opening only one. Seriously? This guy was really thinking about that of all things? No, merely observing and appreciating a fellow swordsman's weapon. No need to act like a child. TCH, he sneered, who the hell are you, huh? A battle of pride, huh? The alpha male sensing his authority and territory being intruded and is now lashing out at the intruder. How juvenile, really. Though was he really an alpha since Kakashi was here? Probably someone that has some weight to swing around back home and is fairly popular. God, home was starting to sound like some garbage tier high school shonen cartoon. I gave him a smile. The type of smile that he would use to give to me back then that would easily get under my skin. It was a cocky assuredness smile. Now I knew why he did it. It ticked people off fairly easily. Who am I? Well, I'm the person that's here to save your sorry ass from whatever predicament you found yourself in. He took a challenging step towards me. Look here, asshole. He puffed up a bit again. How cute. We don't need your assistance. We have everything under perfect control here. Now why don't you go back to wherever you came from and stay away? This is official shinobi business, and you are totally not a shinobi. I thought for a moment. Technically I wasn't a shinobi anymore. An active one, that is, but on the other hand I still went through the whole system and got a couple of souvenirs. To push more buttons or not to push more buttons? That is the question. Silence, Tsubasa, and not another word, Kakashi ordered. Man, I've never heard Kakashi sound more annoyed in his life since ever. Sorry about that, he apologized, looking sheepish. As you can see, I'm still trying to teach my team manners and civility. I snickered in response. It's fine, I really couldn't care too much from background rabble. The girl that I guessed was in a relationship with the boy held him back from making a retort. Come on. Let's head back to where we're staying at, and we can catch up in a more private setting, said Kakashi. Alright, I'll clean up and grab my stuff. I hurriedly cleaned the cooking equipment in record time. Man, I haven't got to really cook to this many people in a while. Damn, it felt good cooking again. As I picked up my pack and walked back towards Kakashi's team, I heard someone call out to me. Turning around, it was those two girls from before that I helped. Yoshino, the younger sister, ran up to me as I crouched down to her level before giving me the biggest hug her tiny little frame could give me. Will we ever see you again? She asked sadly. My face softened. I always had a soft spot for little kids. They were so innocent and pure, and their smiles were one of the most beautiful things in the world. It always reminded me of the reasons why I fought and tried my hardest to be a hero. Of course, Yoshino. In fact, I got something I want you to hold on for me, okay? She shook her head. Gosh, what an adorable girl. Rummaging in my pack again, I unfurled a scroll before unsealing a small plush lion inside the pack. I smiled fondly at the object in my hand for a moment. She always did love lions. God, I miss her so much. There was a mix of pain and longing in my chest for her. Repacking the stuff, I presented it to the young orphan. This is yours now, okay? I want you to protect because it'll protect you. Whenever you're lonely or sad, just hold on to this, okay? Her eyes shined brighter than 1,000 stars. She looked like she never received a gift before. I will. I'll protect it and cherish it forever. Thank you so much, big brother. Yoshino hugged the plush lion before hugging me as well. Everyone in the area that saw it softened their gaze at the exchange. Even the ones who were most adamant in keeping a strong appearance faltered. I gave a soft laugh before standing up and slinging my backpack on. I turned towards her big sister Shirley before sheepishly saying, Sorry, I don't exactly have a gift for you, but I'll be sure to think of something before I leave. The chestnut-haired girl blushed. It's all right. Don't worry. Trust me, please. Besides, I'd rather much just do this. Before I knew it, she was hugging me with all her might, drinking me in as if not wanting to forget what this was like. You better visit us before you leave. I returned her hug. Of course, it'd be rude of me not to. We separated before I walked back towards where the others were waiting for me. That was nice of you, quietly said the pink girl as I passed her. Yeah, I got a little soft spot for kids, I replied easily. Sakura Haruno, she introduced herself. I held out a hand. Uzumaki Naruto. You can call me Naruto. We shook hands. I studied her a bit before letting go. For some reason she reminded me of someone I met a long time ago, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. Meh, I stored the thought away, continuing my walk. Come on, you two. We can have proper introductions when we're back the house, said Kakashi as he hurried us along. I had a funny feeling in me, telling me that it was going to be interesting when we got to the place where Kakashi and his team were staying. For one, Haruno Sakura, the man that was seated right in front of her on the dining table, was quite vexing. In a way, it was type of feeling where one couldn't quite put their hands on where they had seen them before. That you knew you came across them sometime or someplace, but you weren't able to exactly pinpoint it. She sat quiet and pensive while occasionally stealing glances at Naruto before looking back to her medical handbook. She would freely admit that Naruto was incredibly handsome. Yet unlike her generation that focused a large amount of attention to aesthetics and flaunting it around, he was incredibly subdued and modest. It showed it in his personality and how he dressed, although he had a sarcastic touch to him with a hint of snarky and snide. In fact, he doesn't even show off anything other than his face. She slightly blushed before shoving her book in front of her face to hide it. It was true, the only noteworthy thing of his ensemble was that red overcoat that covered his left side. Everything else was covered. I really hope Sasuke and Daisuke don't go at it again. She looked over at the other two on her left. They stood over head and shoulders over everyone back in Konoha in terms of power, popularity, and skill, and because of that they were incredibly prideful and had an ego the size of a mountain. They made sure that they got the last word in and always had some offhand comment to say. Luckily, ever since Kakashi came into their lives, he had tried his best to quite literally beat it out of them. It was a work in progress. Okay, maybe a lot of work in progress. Kakashi clapped his hands, causing Sakura's trail of thought to be broken. Now that we're all situated, how about we now all formally introduce ourselves? He said at the head of the table. Sakura, why don't you go first? Putting down her book, she coughed in her hand to clear her throat before beginning. I'm Sakura Haruno. I like to practice my medical skills and read my books. I love to drink tea if I have the chance, and well, I like the peace and quiet a lot, and sometimes I write stories, but I don't really go anywhere with it. I also like helping people if I can, so there's that. As for dislikes, I don't really like loud places or people. I really don't like spicy foods and anything hot. I don't like fire in general, to be honest. As for my dreams, I'd like to be the medical director for Konoha's medical department. Naruto gave her a questioning look at her dislike for fire. Did she have a dislike for fire because of the incident, or was it something else? He closed his eyes. He wasn't going to ask. He didn't know her enough to poke and prod into her business, maybe later down the line if they got to know each other. Good, Sakura. He pointed to the next person, being the ponytailed girl sitting next to her. You next? The person in question huffed a breath of air, as if she didn't want to introduce herself. My name is Sasuke Uchiha, Naruto blinked. Wasn't that a male name? Actually, that was the Sandame's father's name. Huh. He wouldn't mind finding out the story to this name blunder. As if sensing it, the raven-haired teen sent a scathing look to him. Yes, I know what you're thinking, that it's a guy's name. TCH, whatever, I don't have to explain myself to you. He raised his hands as if he were innocent in his thoughts. She rolled her eyes, looking away. I like training and going out with my friends. I love my boyfriend even more. At this, she hooked her arm around the man next to her. He's really great, loving, and strong. At this, she went on describing him. Naruto gave an awkward smile coupled with a strange expression at how descriptive she was being. He looked at Sakura before slowly looking to Kakashi, and saw that he was palming his face. This is really awkward, thought Naruto. I don't really like weak people and those who can't stand up for themselves. That's their fault. Naruto frowned a bit but refrained from making a comment. As for my dreams, I want to avenge my clan for what my brother did. Ah, so this was his little sister. Man, if he hadn't told me that this was his sister, I wouldn't have believed him. They're not even alike. It's night and day of what they represent. Geez, I bet he's gonna be disappointed as all hell when he finds out. Kakashi gave her the driest of looks. Okay then, he waved over to the teenager that was to his right. Your turn, kid. I'm not a kid, he sneered. The name's Daisuke Tsubasa. I like drinking, hanging out with friends, training to be strong, and obviously my girlfriend. I hate people who waste my time and those who are weak. My personal belief? If you can't stand up for yourself, you should fade away into history. As for my dreams? I just want to be famous and my name known everywhere. Maybe something like Hokage, I don't know. Kakashi had a feeling Naruto and Daisuke would not get along at all. They were polar opposites that represented the extremes of each side. He took a glance at Naruto and saw that he had a frown marred on his face. Yep. The personalities differ too much that they are going to clash sooner or later. It all depended on who would lash out at who first, and considering Naruto had a penchant to push people's buttons, well, it was going to be a bit glorious when it all exploded in Kakashi's opinion. But that wasn't needed right now, and he certainly didn't need for the house to explode. Figuratively and literally. Plucking an apple from the bowl on the table, he tossed it over to distract Naruto from going after Daisuke. And lastly, you Naruto. He deftly caught the apple, giving it a look once over before taking a bite. Let's see, where to start. I like cooking, housework, fixing things, and I don't mind doing part-time jobs really, it's kind of nice, adds a bit of normality to life. I enjoy tea a lot and coffee time to time. I also like practicing my thaumaturgy, swordplay, and archery. I love helping others. Doesn't really matter who, to be honest. I don't seek rewards or gains out of it. I just do it for the sake of helping people, because in all honesty that's a reward in of itself. Kakashi took note of what he said about helping people. And there we have it, his hero complex. At least that hasn't changed a bit. He scratched his head a bit. Dislikes? There's only a few things really that I don't like. I hate arrogance and selfishness. I think it's incredibly unfair that some people survive and others don't. There's a couple others, but I won't really get into detail about that. As for dreams? Naruto took a breath before looking up to the ceiling. Well, it's a work in progress. I know it's going to sound stupid to you all since you won't really understand it. I inherited my father's dream and well, you see, he wanted to be a hero. I want to save everyone, that if one life could be saved, perhaps I may be capable of saving all who suffer. There it was again, that conviction in his beliefs. Exposing his dream of being a hero. While most kids dreamed of being a hero, Naruto was the one who really did want to become one. After all, who else better than him? The one who survived one of the greatest fire disasters in history. The one who was adopted by Kiritsugu. A man who merely wanted to save people from suffering and to see others live happily. No. Naruto was truly the only ideal candidate who could make his dreams a reality. A world where no one had to suffer and everyone was happy. For Kakashi, that was a good reality he wouldn't mind being in. Haha. You're right, that does sound stupid. It was from Daisuke. He was laughing derisively at how utterly childish and inane it was. A hero? In the shinobi world? For him it was completely nonsense. In this world it was nothing but killers, and those who stood on top were the strongest, dictated who lived and who died. That was the singular reason why Daisuke Tsubasa wanted to be strong. He wanted to stand amongst the greatest, for all to acknowledge that he was the greatest. Daisuke. It was Sakura. You shouldn't deride a noble dream like Naruto-kun's. He wants to help others to make this a better world. That's why I want to become a medic to prevent lives from being needlessly lost. The other members of Team 7 blinked. It was the first time that Sakura had ever spoken with such reverence and heat. She was normally subdued and really only spoken unless spoken to. Kakashi looked on. Does someone have a crush? He could tell by the slight nuances that displayed on Sakura's features. Ha, how cute. What? Looking as if he did nothing wrong. It's dumb, it's stupid, and it sounds like some little kid's dream. A hero? PSSH fucking come on. Nonetheless, that's still incredibly rude. You should apologize because... She stopped. It was Naruto raising his hand. It's okay, Sakura. He smiled softly at her, causing her to blush a bit. Everyone has their own beliefs, to each their own, you know. Besides, I lost count how many times people have told me how silly it is, but no matter what, I'll keep chasing it. Besides, how wrong can it be to simply wish for everyone to be happy? For one, Sasuke Uchiha, his words struck something deep inside her. Something that she buried 6 feet under in her mind. They sounded similar to the words her brother shared with her years ago before he killed everyone. She zoned out completely through everything else when Naruto shared his dreams. To save everyone. Her elder brother had told her that when she was younger. That he too had wanted to save people from suffering. She furrowed her eyebrows. Why am I thinking about him of all things? It perplexed and confused her so. The man across the table represented all the good things about her brother before he went and killed everyone in the clan. She wanted to leap to her boyfriend's assistance in his ridiculing, but she couldn't find herself to do so. It's because you two once shared a similar dream. A grimace marred her delicate features. Where had that come from? Something about his words were uncovering years of suppression about herself. If she were honest with herself, she hadn't ever came across anyone that type of conviction in their goals. It was spoken in such a way that it felt like they were unbreakable. And how he treated that one orphan Yoshino. In a way it was similar to how he had used to treat her when she was younger. Kindness, affection, and love in its purest form. Not wanting any sort of gain of wealth or fame, merely only to see the joy and happiness in others. She shook her head a bit. Where was that voice coming from? Was she going crazy because of this stranger? Why was this happening to her of all times? Daisuke and Sakura were arguing in the background before it slowly devolved to him throwing insults at her. Naruto across the table was about to jump to her defense before he was beaten by Kakashi. Enough, it was Kakashi. Daisuke, you are completely out of line. Shut your mouth before I shut it for you. I should write you up for insubordination, but luckily I have something else in mind. He turned towards Naruto. As you can see, I need some help with training my team, and well, I'm a bit indisposed with recovery, so I haven't been doing an admirable job lately. Would you mind taking over so my recovery process goes faster? Naruto leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms and closing his eyes before opening up one of them, giving a smirk. I suppose I could. Kakashi simply smiled his visible eye in response. Good, then how about we start now then? At this the black-haired teen slammed his hands on the table. Wait. We didn't even eat lunch yet. Their sensei simply shrugged. We took too long on introducing ourselves that it cut into our lunch break and our training. No more complaining, off to training everyone. This reminded them of their test to become genin not too long ago. But you two didn't even eat either, he protested. Nope, Naruto ate, and so did I the entire time. Didn't you notice the fruits we were snacking on? Remember my first lesson, look underneath the underneath. Now chop chop, back to training everyone. All 5 of them gathered in the same field that they were in since the morning. Naruto on one side, Team 7 across from him, and Kakashi sitting down off to the side of them to observe. Let's see how far you've progressed, Naruto. He flipped open his book to disguise himself from actually observing. I scratched my head. Well shit, Kakashi, maybe I should have declined since I never really taught anyone before. Geez, I'm expected to teach them lessons too. Maybe I should teach them how I was taught? Kakashi, you don't really care too much about how they're taught, right? He looked up from his book. Nah, as long as they're in one piece, then I couldn't really care too much. Huh. Alright then, there's the green light. I'll admit my lessons will be extremely unconventional. Really, there are 2 ways for you all to learn. I raised a hand holding up one finger. First is the slow and easy way. Slow exercises, repeated drills, and instructed sparring are what we'd normally do to get everyone accustomed to live combat. The second, I brought up a second finger, is well, live combat. Reason being is that one can make leaps and bounds in skill compared to years of slow training. The feeling of death makes one react faster, plan better, think smarter, and learn quicker. What one student can learn in 1 year, the other can learn in a mere month. I smiled at them. Guess which way you all will be learning today? The first way? It was Sakura who asked timidly. I laughed at her boldness. Sadly no, for you 3 are a bit strapped for time. Worth a shot, she shrugged. I was beginning to like this girl. With that, all 3 of you will be fighting me all at once. Your goal will be to try to land a hit on me at least once. Trace. On. I traced a plain Bakken, causing blue arcs of pure energy to bounce around my form everywhere. They all stared like children at a circus at how I traced the weapon. Kakashi merely raised an eyebrow at the display. Tapping the ground with the tip of the sword, I asked them, Are you all ready? The guy with the piercing smirked. "TCH, this'll be easy, sensei," he mocked before cracking his knuckles and rolling his shoulders. I merely smiled in return. This one will be the first one to be taught a lesson. Sakura and Sasuke both set themselves in a familiar stance, signaling they were ready. I grabbed my wooden sword and assumed a stance that she taught me that suited to her sword. While the Bakken and the other sword were of different makes, it would suffice for this session. I sent chakra down into my legs, causing my circuits to flare up and glow an eerily blue. "Begin!" I released the built-up chakra and blasted forward faster than their eyes could keep track. I swung my sword at Daisuke 3 times in the span of a heartbeat. Once in the head and 2 times in the chest. The first one dazed him, the second hit forced the air out of his lungs, and the third hit sent him flying back a dozen meters or so. Sensing danger from both sides of me, I flooded my body with chakra, vanishing so fast I left a crater, causing the 2 kunoichi to stumble in their attack. I reappeared before them as they recovered. I swung the wooden sword with one hand at Sakura. 2 strikes. An overhead strike at her collarbone, bruising it, and the last strike into her diaphragm. It was with enough force that I knocked her back a few meters, leaving her curled up on the ground. Without stopping, I followed through from my last strike, spinning on the balls of my feet, smacking Sasuke straight in the face with the tip of my sword. It was enough to stun her before I followed through with a nasty underhand swing into her chin, causing her to go airborne for a second. Fast, thought Kakashi. He did it all in under a couple of seconds. What monstrous speed! I walked back to the other side of the field before calmly placing the tip of the sword into the ground, resting my hands on the butt of the sword. Slow. Pitifully slow. Get up. Sakura, it's time you put your medical techniques to use. We'll be at this for some while. They all groaned in protest before slowly compiling themselves back together. This was completely unexpected for them. They were so used to Kakashi waiting for them to charge at him, and not an opponent who was so overly aggressive. He certainly did not pull his strikes either. I pointed my Bakken at Sasuke first. Why did you not pull out your blade swords, woman? Are you not a practitioner of the sword, or do you merely hold onto it for looks? I shifted it over to Daisuke next. And you? You call yourself a shinobi, yet you were caught off guard by a simple frontal charge? Utterly pitiful yet expected. All bark and no bite. I planted the wooden sword back into the ground. And Sakura, you are the support. Their lifeline. Yet you fell so quickly. How can you expect to save people when you can't even save yourself? I was goading them. Kakashi knew it as well, as he was currently disinterested in his book and gauging his team's reactions. Why, this fucking bastard, I'll show him, growled Daisuke as he rolled up his sleeves and pulled out a pair of kunai, readying himself for the next bout. Sasuke gritted her teeth in offense to my words. She made no retort though, and only slid out her chikuto and readying herself in a basic stance. I frowned slightly at her sword stance. It had holes here and there, and not intentionally either. It was the sign of someone who had recently taken up the way of the sword. Give or take a year or so. How foolish of me to think that this person would be on the same level as her. I shifted my eyes towards Sakura and saw that she had closed her eyes in concentration, breathing in and out slowly to steady herself. Good, she was keeping calm and staying focused even under my barbs. I took note of her stance. It was reminiscent of one Tsunade Senju. This will certainly be interesting now, sadly not enough against me. Nodding my head in approval, I took up the same stance again. Bending my knees slightly, I sent chakra down through them once more. Now that they had a taste of a frontal charge, now to come from the rear and take Sakura out first. Let's see what they do when their support is taken away from them. Without signaling to begin, I disappeared from their eyes in a burst of unrivaled speed. They all visibly widened their eyes in reaction, but it was too late. I was already upon them like a hawk in a dive to its prey. Right behind Sakura, I swung overhead with enough force to lay her out on the ground onto her back, flattening her. To my utter surprise, she backed into me, causing my swing to hit air. I narrowed my eyes. I saw her about to elbow me into my ribs, but it was too late. Nice try though. Using my free hand, I pushed her away before jumping and spinning in the air to avoid the other 2 attacks coming my way. I swung downward, smacking away at my opponent, who overshot and went under me. I planted both of my feet firmly on the ground and saw Sasuke's sword cutting into the air after my head. Stepping forward, I went into her reach and simply tapped underneath the sword, causing her swing to go wide and miss me. She tried correcting it by going with the flow and spinning, but it was too slow, so I snapped a kick at her exposed back and using it as a springboard to avoid Sakura's attack. While they weren't exactly cooperating with each other, they at least made plays off of each other, so I guess it was a semblance of teamwork, albeit crude and awkward. This fight felt incredibly slow. For me, it was like watching everything in slow motion. Whenever I fought, I reinforced my eyes and saw everything with clarity. I could count the individual strands on Sakura's pink hair. I could see the pores on her face and the details of her green eyes. My perception of time was slowed so much that I could even count the individual flaps of a hummingbird's wing if I wanted to. The first fight showed the gap and disparity between me and Kakashi's students. The second match was me deliberately slowing down to the point that they could at least make moves against me, but even then that wasn't enough, as I was 1,000 steps ahead of them. They weren't near fast enough to tag me, let alone get close to me unless I allowed it. Just as Sakura's fist sword passed me, I bent my knees slightly and swung with my bakken with my right hand into her gut, sending her to back where she came from. Just as soon as I smacked her away, my sixth sense kicked in and I felt someone rushing in behind me. I didn't bother to even look. I simply reversed my grip and jabbed it backwards like an engine piston. I felt the tit dig into his gut before sending him soaring away. Now it was just me and Sasuke. She was breathing heavy and had her Sharingan activated. I took note of them. They only had 2 tomos, so she was still developing them. In a way, the red in her eyes looked mesmerizing. I gave her a smirk, time to show her what a swordsman could really do. I took a page out of one Sasaki Kojuru. The bakken wasn't as long as his Manahoshi Zao, so I would have to get in a bit closer, but that didn't really matter. I stepped into her range. She swung overhead. A fatal mistake. Her footing wasn't right, so when I parried upwards it knocked her off balance, but still in range for me to enact my technique. Her teammates wouldn't make it in time to stop me, and besides, it was one of the fastest sword techniques in the world. It reached a level comparable to one out of pure godlike skill that it surpassed even the realm of gods. It was a technique where 3 concurrent arching blades close in on the enemy from all sides to create a prison. It allowed no chance for defense or evasion once you were in range. The most comparable thing to this technique was the dance of the crescent move, but even then that was like comparing a papier-mâché to the real thing. It was merely a poor man's version of it, in all honesty. I took a step back and raised my sword in a stance. I activated my chakra, flooding my circuits throughout my body. I breathed before stepping forward and swinging once from the right. 1 slash. I swung again from overhead, leaving no chance to jump out of the way. 2 slashes. I shifted my stance and swung for a final 3rd time from her left. 3 slashes. Left. Center. Right. All 3 strikes occurred simultaneously, instantly. All 3 arching, overlapping slashes that disregarded the concept of time and space produced an attack that arrived from 3 different dimensions. It was such a technique that it transcended speed, dexterity, feints, and many other elements. My bakken hit her in the head, neck, and chest. What normally was a fatal technique that would decapitate a person was lightened to a hard tap that would disorientate and bruise her. I was supposed to be training them, not killing them after all. She lost her grip on her sword, but I deftly caught it in the air before it hit the ground. Everyone stopped. All was quiet in the clearing, and I noticed Kakashi was staring intently at me, that he even had his Sharingan out. It didn't matter, there was no way that his special I could replicate the skill that I just performed. It was simply beyond normal comprehension. The other 2 teammates of Sasuke stood stock, still being simply stunned. What had they just witnessed? Was that their eyes playing tricks on them, or did Naruto really struck from 3 different ways simultaneously? Kakashi had his eyes narrowed. What was that technique? Not even my eye could track it. All I saw was 3 different slashes occurring at the same time. That's impossible, though. The only thing comparable was Dance of the Crescent Moon, but even then, this was simply beyond it. Was it a space-time technique? No, it was something more. His interest was definitely piqued. He pulled down his headband covering up his eye before getting up and walking over to Naruto. Naruto, what was that? Sasuke was coughing on the ground and rubbing the spot on her neck where my wooden blade hit. I offered a hand to help up. She hesitated for a moment before I rolled my eyes and simply grabbed her hand and brought her up on her feet. Really? Geez, teenagers were absolutely ridiculously, I swear. I held her sword out to her. She quickly grabbed it and sheathed it away. One of my eyebrows went up in question. Was she blushing? God, please no, I hope not. I turned to Kakashi. It's a sword technique that I came across during my travels. I've seen and encountered many things, Naruto. I've fought, survived, and even won against the swordsmen from the mist, and even their skill pales in comparison to whatever that was, he replied. Huffing a small laugh, I looked at my practice sword. In all honesty, I didn't even use the right weapon for the technique. I admitted which was true. Manahoshizao was an incredibly long blade of 150 centimeters, while the sword in my hand was only a mere 90 centimeters. The blade that's normally paired with this technique is usually double the length of what I used. I merely improvised and had to open up an opportunity myself to carry out the technique. I twirled my bakken in the air a couple of times, planting the tip into the ground before continuing. Have you ever heard of the legendary swordsman Sasaki Kojuru? No, I don't suppose so. Why? Well, he was a person with almost unrivaled skill with the blade. The technique is called Tsubangeshi. He had developed it on a whim to cut down a swallow in mid-flight. They say he found that swallows feel the shaking of the wind caused by the sword strike in order to avoid the blade. It was impossible to avoid disturbing the air, no matter how fast he struck, and a sword can only move in a straight line. I gave an example by swinging the blade into the air. You also have to remember that the bird can move horizontally or vertically to avoid it, so a single strike is not enough to cut it down. This means that the bird's escape route must be blocked off, so after the first attack another is necessary to trap it. I was spinning the practice blade casually, now slightly showing off. But the second blow can't possibly be done in time to hit the swallow, and suffice to say it is beyond human capabilities to attack multiple times in one single instant. So Sasaki Kojuru accepted that it was impossible, but he was a man that had nothing else to do, so he spent his entire life practicing the sword in order to reach the pinnacle of swordsmanship. After an untold amount of years, he perfected it, and to his surprise it reached another state entirely. He created the ultimate killing technique by doing nothing but spending his life swinging his sword, following a worthless idea on how to kill a simple swallow. Swallow reversal, huh? That's a scary technique you got there. I nodded, although that wasn't even the scariest nor deadliest skill that I had. There were far more monstrous things I had stored away, but I wasn't about to tell Kakashi that. The girl who was the recipient of said technique was in shock. She was still trying to comprehend such a blade skill. Even though I had the Sharingan activated, it was just so fast. She recollected the memory, trying to gain a hint of understanding. 3 blades just flashed into existence, and soon as they came up it disappeared and I was on the ground. This guy, he's an absolute monster. The man that was speaking with her teacher, explaining the backstory and a bit of its intricacies, was absolutely terrifying. If he and her brother had fought, she had an inkling suspicion that Naruto would come out on top. The overwhelming amount of power that he exuded was out of this realm. This was the type of power that she needed if she wanted to defeat her brother, to avenge her clan for what he'd done. But how would she go about asking him to train her? And the more important question was, would Daisuke allow her? In certain aspects he was a good partner, but he was incredibly possessive and paranoid about the people she talked to. She was only allowed to hang out and talk with his friends and those he approved of. If they didn't, then he'd be sure to constantly be around her to dissuade any budding relations with other people. Honestly, it grated on her nerves, but she dealt with it as he had given her company in an otherwise lonely life. It was ironic. From the outside looking in perspective, Uchiha Sasuke had many things, but from the inside looking out, she had very little. It's not fair that he makes the rules and doesn't even follow them himself. She furrowed her brows. There it was again, that voice in the back of her head. She closed her eyes. Now isn't the time to go crazy and develop schizophrenia of all things. Ugh, I'll just deal with it later. I finished up my story, and the entire time that Sasuke girl was staring straight at me. I snapped my fingers a couple of times to catch her attention. My eyes rolled in annoyance. Geez, what was up with people nowadays? Strolling up to her, I poked her in the forehead, causing her to stumble back a step before rubbing it lightly in a daze. Oh, stop daydreaming. You three have a lot more training to do, and I can't have you going into La La Land. I need you here and now. You can think about your boyfriend later. Sasuke flustered a bit. I wasn't daydreaming, and that wasn't what I was thinking about. Just a headache from you whacking me in the head is all. I scoffed before poking her in the forehead again. Have I ever told you how much fun it is to poke things and see if they get annoyed? How is it my fault that you don't know how to block or dodge, you numbskull? It's easy. You see something coming at you? You dodge, you idiot. I kept poking at her the entire time. The pony-tailed girl blushed and tried knocking my hand away but failed. Quit that. That's really annoying and rude. She wasn't even able to avoid my incessant poking. See? You dolt, you can't even dodge a simple poke. How are you supposed to dodge this? I brandished my training sword. If you can't even dodge this. I poked at her one final time right in the middle of her eyebrows, causing her to stagger back another step. Hey asshole! That's my girlfriend you're flirting with. Ugh, I gave him a deadpan stare. Really? He walked up to me puffing up, trying to look intimidating. As soon as he got into range, I smacked him on the top of his head with the sword. Down, boy. Back to training, all of you. I walked back to where I was when we started our training session. I really hoped I didn't have to deal with some teenage romance drama. If I did, I promised myself I was going to brutally crush it into the ground if I got pulled into it. Since you're all acting lively again, we're taking it from the top. We won't rest until dinner time. I glared at the guy in piercings. This guy was really annoying, so I'll take the low road and be petty. Hey, just cause I was a hero didn't mean I had a sadistic side. I rightfully placed the blame on those who brought me up. It's been almost a week since I arrived here to assist Kakashi's team. In that time, I drilled his team to survive against an overwhelming opponent that they had no chance in winning against. At first they performed abysmally, but slowly picked up after the first 2 days of me beating their collective asses in. I won't lie, it was pretty damn cathartic just demolishing them, but it got boring after a while. Every day I would summon some clones to escort Tazuna and his family in place of Team 7 while they trained. At the first night of my stay I had a bit of confrontation with the grandson of the bridge builder, but after a one-on-one and a heart-to-heart I swear the kid worships the ground I walk on now. Sigh, what can I say? I'm sucker for kids and tragic pasts. Then again, I was a kid at one point that had a tragic past. Over the next couple of days I got to know Team 7 better through Kakashi. He gave me a brief rundown of each of his students' background. Sakura was an orphan, Daisuke was the son of a lofty member on the council, and Sasuke was the venerated last Uchiha princess. I rolled my eyes at the word princess. Geez, people back home must love handing out titles. Thinking back on it, it sort of explains why those two have a holier-than-thou type personality. Still doesn't excuse them for being a bunch of assholes. Going back to Team 7, it was a bit awkward to be honest, well, except for Kakashi and me. And I guess Sakura as well. She'd always do her best to stick around us, which was nice. Good girl, and a ridiculously smart one too. I can definitely see her being the medical director for Konoha in the near future. I asked him out of curiosity about her past, but he said that I'd have to ask her myself as it wasn't his place to tell. I conceded, I'll find out later. Sooner enough, I wasn't too bothered too much to find out. Now on the other hand, we had Sasuke and Daisuke. I had quite possibly one of the most awkward nights I will ever have in my life. With my naturally enhanced hearing, I heard everything that was going on in that room. Seriously, they were on a mission and they were bumping it in the night? How did anyone else sleep without hearing all that bumping and moaning going in there? That next morning when we were all training, I was particularly vicious and vindictive with my strikes. It felt awfully cathartic to get back at them for what they did. There was a time and place. This was definitely neither the time nor the place for them to have fun at night. Besides that, I know for a fact that Daisuke did not like me at all, and he tended to be fairly confrontational with me a lot of times over the silliest of things. Most of the times he tried to turn it into a competition of some sorts. Have I mentioned he's incredibly possessive of Sasuke? Guy thinks I'm out to steal his girlfriend or something. Kakashi was right, teenagers are incredibly annoying. As for Itachi's younger sibling? I don't really know, I suppose. I sort of get the feeling she wants to talk to me, but holds herself back or something. Have I mentioned teenagers are also extremely confusing? At first she came off sort of bitchy and cold, okay, still is. But I can see she wants to mean well and help people out but doesn't know how to express it. Alright, I'll admit that was really confusing and thinking about it was starting to annoy me, so I pushed it out of my head and brought my attention back to what I was doing. At the moment I was on a path going out of the town and into the island to find Gato's base of operations. Team 7 was back on the bridge watching over the bridge builder and his crew. Kakashi called for the team to take a break a day before to recover before the inevitable confrontation. I did my best for those three in the limited amount of time we had. It was out of my hands now when the fight starts. Venturing deeper into the island, I noticed that the fog had started to become dense. I was on the right track if this unnaturally dense fog in the middle of the forest were to tell me anything. I fed the circuits to my eyes with chakra, allowing me to pierce through the fog. It wasn't long before I came across an enormous cocoon structure that was held in place by large bridge steel beams. Huh! Well, that was easy. A lot easier than some of the past foes that I had to try and find, that's for sure. With my enhanced sight, I noticed 2 guards at the gate. They were simple thugs hired to do a simple job. I traced a large matte black, Western-style straight bow, with a simple design that was constructed to be resistant enough to fire noble phantasms. It wasn't my bow originally, and to be honest, I didn't really know what type of material it was made of. Normally I would be able to discern it at a glance, but it was something that present-day humans weren't able to manufacture yet. I knocked 2 arrows back and fired them in succession rapidly. The arrows flew true and pinned the 2 guards against the wall by the shoulders. My red arrows dug deep into the concrete wall, so they weren't going to be able to pull them out any time soon. They screamed in pain as they were pinned. I casually walked past them and dematerialized my bow as I blew open the doors off their hinges with a kick. Knock, knock, I said out loud, hoping to provoke a response. Hello? Anyone in here? Nothing. It was dead as a graveyard. That was strange. Where was everyone? I summoned one of my most treasured blades in my hands and gripped it. It was a sword that was enclosed in a bounded field that was made up of multiple layers of wind compressed into super high pressure air with a massive amount of prana. It distorted the refraction of light and rendered the blade inside completely invisible. Ghosting along in the building, I found that it was relatively empty. I checked each and every room before I came across what I assumed to be the room that housed the rogue shinobis. There were used bandages that hadn't been thrown away yet, which were stained with blood. They were in this room not too long ago. Shit. I bolted out of the room and headed up to where I thought Gato's office would be. I cut the door down and immediately combed through the room for anything that might be of use. I pulled out all the drawers and knocked everything down to uncover anything that was hidden. The documents left on the desk and inside the cabinets weren't anything of use, but I bet the safe has a couple of things that might be useful. It was a simple safe in the wall that had been behind a painting. How cliché. I reinforced my arm slightly and casually pulled the safe's door open with ease. There were a couple of scrolls and a relatively small book in the middle. I grabbed the book and flipped through the pages. It was a journal. Bingo. I went to the last entry and read its contents. I couldn't help but roll my eyes as I finished reading. It was the most cliched dime a dozen plot, but whatever, I found out what he was going to do. Double shit. How could I be so stupid? I smacked my face at my short-sightedness before pocketing the book in my back pocket. What were the chances that I would be out looking for them and be nowhere near the bridge? I cursed my luck. At times it was just as bad as the guy with the red demonic lance that wore blue tights as his outfit. And boy, did he have some seriously bad luck. I crashed through the window and pushed chakra down into my legs, causing the circuits to flare up. As soon as my feet touched the ground, I blasted off. The ground cratered and a good bit of the cocoon building was damaged from the afterblast. For one Hokage Kakashi, Jonin of Konoha, copier of 1,000 techniques, he was not having a good day at all. He ducked under a swipe from the dual swords of Raiga before kicking away and using his body as a springboard to flip over a swipe from Zabuza. He was seriously not having a good day. Infusing his kunai with lightning chakra, he went on the offensive against the wielder of the Kubikuribocho. Speed was going to be his ally here. He couldn't afford to waste any chakra until Naruto showed up. What a time for him to go out and search for Gato's base. I don't know how long I'll be able to hold these two off. It was rotten luck. Kakashi admitted that they were attacked when Naruto was long gone. On a one-on-one basis he could easily take them on, but he didn't have that luxury. He had to keep both of them on him, or else his students would be chopped up into fine bits. No sense in complaining now. The best he could do was stall, pray that his team defeated the fake hunter Shinobi, and for Naruto to arrive. He made a downward slash at Zabuza that was deftly blocked. Applying chakra down into his legs, he bounded off the ground in a burst of speed to reappear behind the oversized board sword-wielding rogue Shinobi. He wasn't fast enough as his attack was blocked by the broadside of his foe's overly large sword. Sensing danger from behind, he leaned forward, allowing two blades coated in lightning to soar overhead. He felt the hair on the back of his head stand up from the latent current in the air. Using Zabuza's blade to lean on, he kicked back with both feet, sending Raiga away across the bridge before using his arms to push himself off of the broadside of the massive hunk of metal. Flipping once in the air, he threw several kunai as a distraction to Zabuza before dropping low as he landed to dodge two swipes from a pair of blades. Sweeping his legs out from underneath Raiga, he pressed his advantage by trying to stomp his head into the bridge. Too slow as the dual-wielding man rolled out of the way in time. His stomp left a large indentation on the bridge, and he clicked his tongue in annoyance. Any time now, Naruto. He continued his assault on Raiga, trying to eliminate the weakest of the pair of swordsmen. So engrossed in his duel to kill the swordsman, he temporarily forgot about Zabuza. He looked back and saw that he was already rushing towards Sakura, who was too busy trying to crack through the paneled dome of ice from the outside that was entrapping Sasuke and Daisuke. Shit! Kakashi was about to turn around and cut Zabuza off before he was locked in a stalemate with Raiga. You're not going anywhere, Hatake. He blocked a series of stabs and slashes, desperately trying to make his way over to his students. Sakura! To your left, watch out! He cried out desperately. It was going to be futile. Zabuza was merely 5 steps away from his pink-haired student, and already bringing his massive sword ready to cut her in half. 4 steps away. It felt like everything was in slow motion for Kakashi. 3 steps away. He saw Zabuza's muscles tense up, readying for the swing. 2 steps away. Sakura turned around and her eyes widened. It was too late. 1 step away. The white-masked rogue swordsman swung with all his might at his foe to cut her in half. She closed her eyes. This was it. She readied herself for the coming pain of being cut down. A resounding sonic boom akin to a thunderclap shocked through the air, and a red blur blasted through the ice dome, crashing into a masked shinobi that was traveling in between the ice mirrors, knocking her into the ground unconscious. He landed in front of Sakura before swinging his invisible sword to his right, countering Zabuza's blow, and sending him flying with his sword across to the unbuilt end of the bridge. I landed with such speed that it dispelled the fog around us. I looked at Sakura and saw that she fell on her, but from the force of the blow from when I countered the massive blade. I helped her up and smiled. Sorry I'm late, but it looks like I came in just in time. Not too far I saw Kakashi disengage and retreating to me. He looked roughed up with cuts everywhere and moderate bleeding. He was breathing in laboriously. He must have been at this for a while, fending these two off. I patted Kakashi on the shoulder, signaling him to leave it to me. On the other end of the bridge, the oversized broadsword-wielding shinobi recovered, and he looked pissed. Who the hell are you? I ignored his question. He would soon learn who I was. Walking forward, tall and proud just like she would. I'm confident I did a fair job at imitating her, though I was a lot taller in terms of height than her. Blue translucent energy particles floated around me as I materialized my favorite outfit used for combat to substitute my traveler's clothes. It was a full black body armor, with metal-plated shoes that was attached to my trousers. I still had my red overcoat, which now covered my arms and upper torso and was fashioned and tied with an Uzumaki knot. 2. Lifting the blade covered in invisible air, I pointed it towards the two swordsmen, challenging them, my eyes hardening as I saturated my circuits with chakra, causing them to glow throughout my body. Tell me, former swordsman of the Hidden Mist, do you believe your swordplay to be up to par? Chapter 3: The Wrought Iron Hero. Trace on. I calmly structurally analyzed and stored the blades in my mind, starting with the massive broadsword shaped like a butcher knife. Its name was Kubikuribocho. The blade was first forged over 2 centuries ago, the blacksmith's name unknown, but it most certainly came from the Land of Mist region. There were a total of 6 wielders since its conception, including one Momochi Zabuza. The blade had an incredibly bloodied history, with its total body count of being 522. The blade was mostly forged out of 1045 spring steel along with 7075 aluminum alloy that had trace amounts of zinc in it. 1. I frowned in distaste of the style of the sword itself. It was brutish, glaringly ugly, and a hint of savagery. There were no notable abilities except that it was able to convert the iron from a person's blood to reform the blade if it became damaged. For a supposedly legendary blade, its ability was absolutely lackluster. I had several other blades that shared the same attributes as this blade, and then some. Shifting my eyes, I focused my attention on the twin swords Raiga held. Kiba. Dual swords, each with a slim and straight double-edged blades. They also had these weird out-of-place upward curved bladed prongs on either side of the blade near the point and base of the sword. Apparently the blacksmith had in mind to both thrust, tear, and slice. These were a little bit older compared to the executioner's blade. They were first forged approximately over 400 years ago in the same region. They had a total of 9 wielders since its forgery. The blade was composed of traditional tamahagane infused with lightning chakra when it was being hammered into shape. 1. In my opinion, if they lost the spikes on the blades, they would be more appealing to the eyes. Though they would lose the meaning of fangs if they did, I admitted. This was a more interesting sword compared to the one his partner was wielding. Its main ability was to enhance cutting power in a manner similar to the high-frequency vibrations of lightning-based chakra flow. Because of it, the twin swords gained the moniker of Thunder Swords and being claimed as the sharpest swords in existence. I scoffed in indignation in my head. Sharpest sword in existence, my ass. Durand now came into mind, along with several others such as Caliban, Dyrnwyn, Crocia Moores, Graham, and also yours truly with the sword in my hand. I may be a little biased in terms of grading swords, but the swords I was comparing it to have a far longer history and legend to their names, accomplishing feats that ascended their wielders into the throne. Though I will admit being able to manipulate and transform lightning freely was pretty badass. Along with channeling it into themselves to boost their performance, and if there were a natural lightning storm, they were able to direct concentrated lightning strikes onto the area they desired. So we had one based on sheer power and strength while the other focused on speed and agility. As long as I maintained constant aggression and kept close, I can deny them their ability to use most of their stronger element techniques and interrupt the hand seals to perform them. The water element was notorious for its rather long-winded seals to enact their technique, and lightning, true to its nature, was rather short and fast. But that was all moot as long as I kept at them. I took a second to take in my surroundings. There were equipment and construction vehicles strewn about in the area close by, meaning there weren't going to be much room for them to maneuver and get spacing to perform their techniques. Unless they went out into the waters below, but that would be suicidal for them, as I would just overwhelm them with arrows and more. The day was perfectly clear and sunny, so Raiga was already at a disadvantage of not being at his strongest, and Zabuza was slightly wounded from his bout with Kakashi. All in all, I held the advantage in all aspects for this engage. I smirked at them, causing the two swordsmen to be on edge and take a step back. My body felt comfortably warm from chakra coursing through my circuits. The goal here was to incapacitate them, avoid too much damage to the bridge and equipment, and draw out Gato. Tensing my legs, I leaned forward and blasted off towards them with such force it caused the bridge to rumble and shake. Landing in between them, I struck out the concealed blade with my left hand towards Raiga, forcing him to block. It was with such strength that it caused him to take a knee. Zabuza to my right swung with all his might with his obscenely large broadsword. Hopping up, I planted my feet onto the flat of his blade, and used it like a springboard to flip over Raiga's head. The wielder of Kiba flowed lightning chakra, enhancing his body to give him an edge in his performance, as expected. As soon as my feet touched the ground, we immediately exchanged blows. Sparks shot out as our blades met blow for blow. In the span of a heartbeat, we exchanged over 50 strikes. Over a handful of strikes, I managed to nick him with small cuts here and there all over his body. I had to hand it to my opponent that he was decently experienced with his swordsmanship, but it showed through that he wasn't able to fully measure the length and width of my blade. That was the difference between me and him in our skill level. For comparison, Assassin was at such a skill level that he was able to discern the full measurements of the blade with less than a handful of blows and was even able to counter it. He was truly a foe that stood above head and shoulders compared to other swordsmen. We exchanged one final strike before I shot towards him, shoulder charging him. I caught him in his chest, sending him tumbling onto the ground. In his place, Zabuza came hurtling through at me, forcing me to block his massive swing. From the sheer weight of the blade, it caused me to ground my feet onto the concrete and pushed me back several meters before I stopped the blow. He pushed on further, trying to drive me towards the railings to no avail. Using his own force against him, I redirected the strength and forced the blade down, ramming it into the ground tip first. I jumped back onto the railing and leapt over him before trying to smash my hilt onto the back of his head. My sixth sense screamed at me with the sound of two lightning-infused blades thrusting towards my back. I didn't bother stopping my momentum. With a change in stance, I redirected the path of my blade and spun on the heels of my foot to parry away the two swords. I settled for kicking the masked rogue shinobi into his side before engaging Raiga. I was fairly certain I felt a rib or two snapped from the force of my kick. Raiga came around and leapt to the skies. He channeled more chakra into the swords as he descended, intent on skewering me into the ground like a kebab. Want to know the bad thing about having dumb protrusions coming out of your sword that resembled fangs or hooks? Is that it was absolutely amazing for me to simply slide my sword against his up to the blades that jutted out near the tip, and catching it with the edge of the blade, locking it. And with a great roar, I smashed the green-haired swordsman down onto the ground like a sledgehammer, sending debris everywhere around us. I smirked with satisfaction when I saw his eyes widen when he still hadn't measured the length of my blade, and when I smashed his body onto the ground. Blood and spittle came flying out of his mouth when he impacted the ground, cratering his body. Just an observation, but when your body impacts the ground, it most certainly does not create a body-shaped hole. Raiga found out the hard way. In the meantime, Zabuza finally managed to free his blade from being jammed into the ground. I pressed the attack onto him, causing him to feebly block and counter as best he could against an invisible blade. He swung multiple times, forcing me to block his massive broadsword before jumping back a few ways from me. The thrill of the chase flowed through me as I pursued him. It was a never-ending series of slashes and thrusts from me. His broadsword Kubikuribocho was starting to show signs of serious damage, with dents on the flat of the blade and large chips on the edge. To be fair, his sword acted more of like a bludgeoner than something you would use to cut. With the weight and how it was designed, it seemed like it was more for blunt force trauma, with a decently sharpened edge that used the massive weight to do its work. Zabuza's breathing was ragged and he tasted blood in his mouth. Who the fuck is this guy? This was absolutely absurd that some unknown was manhandling both him and Raiga in sheer swordplay alone. He gave one massive swing accompanied by a guttural roar, forcing me to jump away to dodge. It gave him time to retreat further back to the uncompleted end of the bridge. What's the matter, Zabuza? If you're just going to stand there, you'll give all swordsmen a bad name. I taunted him. If you won't come to me, then I will go to you. The rogue ex-shinobi from the hidden mist growled and glared at me. Damn you, damn you! Who are you to call me a coward when you're concealing your weapon? What is it, a sword or a lance? I smiled at him as he took the bait. I remembered all too well the night she spoke these words, and to be honest, I've always wanted to mess with someone's head like how she did. Maybe. Maybe not. I squeezed the handle of the blade and settled into a basic stance that belied what it was. Maybe it's just a battle axe. Or maybe you're right and it is a lance. I paused to take in the sight of him grinding his teeth beneath his mask. Or you might have been trading blows with a mere Zabuza. I'll have your fucking head, you goddamn clown. I merely returned a derisive smile towards his way. Raikyu. Raiga had gathered chakra between the tips of his swords and shot a sphere of electrical energy at me that sped at the speed of lightning. If I remembered my science classes correctly, a bolt of lightning travels at an average speed of 100 kilometers per second. Meaning it went really mind-bogglingly fast. In around 1/1000th of a second it could travel from kilometers in the sky and straight into the ground. And it was also super hot, as in something around 30,000 degrees Celsius. Yeah. I wasn't really too keen on being turned into vaporized Naruto dust. Like a voice in my head it directed my movements and the path of my blade. Comparable to a floodgate, a surge of a monstrous amount of chakra coursed through my circuits, alighting them with such vibrancy that my body felt like it was on fire. Having this much coursing through my circuits was dangerous, as I ran the risk of burning them out if I kept it going for too long, but I only pulsed the obscene amount of chakra through my body once. It was only for this small moment to counter an imminent death. I twisted my body and swung my sword with Herculean strength at the lightning ball, batting it away from me into the clouds above. It erupted in a splendid display of fireworks, with colossal lightning bolts arcing through the clear blue sky. Not once did I blink in reaction at his technique. Not once did I breathe out an air relief at the close call. I looked at him in the eyes with an impassive face. The only thing giving away any type of acknowledgement was my single raised eyebrow, as if silently questioning him. Was that it? Raiga took a step back in sheer disbelief and bewilderment. His jaw slightly loose from the shock at the sight of me batting away his most powerful attack. What the fuck? My feet blasted me towards where he was, crossing the distance between me and him in the blink of an eye. I swung overhead. He hastily rose his swords to block. It would have worked if I had only used one hand. As soon as our swords touched, a force akin to a bullet train crashed into him, sending him rolling and tumbling into the construction equipment behind him. I followed in pursuit, doggedly vanishing and reappearing in front of him before he could recover. I flipped my sword around, holding it by its blade and swinging it like a bat. The cross guard savagely bashed into the side of his head, knocking him unconscious. His skull banged against the metal of the construction crane before his body slumped like a doll with its strings cut. One down. One more to go. I calmly walked away from his body and turned towards Zabuza. He gripped his executioner's blade and rose the massive blade over his head before slamming it to the side of him, the blade biting into the ground, sticking up. One of my eyebrows rose at the action. What was he doing? Fuck this bridge. Fuck this job. I'm just going to sweep the whole fucking slate clean and bring this bridge to the bottom of the straits. I tilted my head to the left slightly with my one eyebrow still raised. Was he going to try and sink the bridge? I'd laugh at the absurdity if it weren't for the fact that he was kneading and gathering as much chakra as he could when he went into a series of hand seals. It looks like he was going to put all of his chakra into this one singular attack. I couldn't help but watch in earnest as to what he was going to do. My curiosity was getting the best of me. It wasn't long before he finished his hand seals that the water surged up around him. It rose several dozen meters high up into the air. It looked like a vortex water that was beginning to block out a good part of the sky. Millions upon millions of gallons of water was swirling ferociously in that vortex of his. It was bearing down on us like a vengeful god looking to smite us away with a tidal wave. Incredible. But even this wasn't going to be enough. Naruto, Kakashi called for me in concern. It seemed like even he was giving a cause for concern about how powerful this attack was going to be. My hand jutted out to stop him. No. I would show him something even more powerful than what stood before us. I sheathed the sword back inside me, sealing it away protectively before tracing my large black bow. Trace on. I traced a black-bladed sword that had a cross guard forged out of gold with a black handle and a white crystal jewel on its pommel. It was a traditional Western longsword that had a simple elegance. It was a noble phantasm that once belonged to a king named Ritter Tail. Inscribed at the base of the black blade were fairy markings that I couldn't even begin to comprehend nor understand. It was a sword that was not made by human hands, but rather of esoteric beings that I had little to no knowledge of. On the ranking scale, it was only a B rank noble phantasm. It received a B rank for the fact that it could change. Depending on how worthy or well-born a person was, it determined how strong the blade would blaze with fire. If one had a rather weak soul and constitution, the flame would either be so weak akin to a match light, or not even spark a flame at all. But for me, my soul shined the brightest compared to everyone. My soul burned the greatest amongst anyone. If given a physical form, my soul would illuminate brighter than any star in the night, and through this sword it would represent it. My hands gripped the sword before gravity could take effect on the object. As soon as my hands touched the handle, the black blade of the sword lit into a burning inferno. The heat radiated out so much that Kakashi and his team took a step back from it. But I didn't mind it at all. It didn't affect me one bit. After all, I survived that hell all those years ago, being in the middle of that fire. This? It couldn't even compare to what I survived 14 years ago. It was child's play. I glanced at the massive vortex of water that had been building up. It grew even larger than when I first saw it. I'll admit, Zabuza was an impressive warrior to be able to manipulate such an outrageous amount of water. Did I say it looked like millions upon millions of gallons? I meant hundreds of millions. Zabuza was going for broke. He was going all in and banking on this attack that it would win him the fight. The monolithic water construct swirling above us had completely blotted out the sun. The only thing that illuminated the area was the fire blazing from the sword. The winds were howling and raging all around us, with water pelting everyone from all sides. I smoothly knocked the blade, pulled back on the string, causing the blade to change into a more aerodynamic form, and aimed at the center of the swirling vortex. I began forcing as much chakra into my traced weapon, causing the bright red flames to turn into an intensely hot white-blue flame. I fed enough to break the noble phantasm, but stopped short before it reached critical mass. Bright blue energy lanced and arced around me as I readied my shot. Die, you bastard! Die and be swept away into the water below with this bridge! Roared Zabuza at the end of the bridge. Suten Daibakufu! The colossal vortex of water swirled furiously before surging forward towards the bridge. In the midst of the chaos, I serenely breathed in and out before my voice projected outwards for everyone to hear. My soul blazes in the dark night. The blazingly hot sword in my hands began shaking as if eagerly wanting to be released, to show its might against the dark vortex of water bearing down us. It was ready to be released. This was it. DYRNWYN. The broken phantasm streaked out of my bow like a shooting star in the night sky. It traveled so fast and with such force that it made my eyes squint ever so slightly when I released it. In under a second, it flew and met the colossal vortex of water head-on in its center. I lowered my bow in my hands coolly as I watched the sword tackle the water construct. A blink later and Zabuza's attack had disappeared into an enormous cloud of steam. DYRNWYN, the white hilt of Ritter's hail, tore through my enemy's technique with almost utter ease. The concussive force from the blade speeding through was enough to disrupt the technique and blow it back up several kilometers high into the sky. The white-blue flames that coated the blade evaporated all of the water by merely passing through as it continued along its path, traveling into the sky uninterrupted. The back blast was so strong that it pushed all of the equipment and supplies back to the middle of the bridge. Team 7 had fallen on their butts while Kakashi had stood his ground but looked pressed trying to do so. I took a moment to appreciate my sword as it continued upwards, blasting away all the clouds above, ensuring a clear blue sky. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I closed my eyes and breathed in deep. Throughout my body and my circuits, they felt extremely hot, as if a hot rod had been inserted everywhere. With my built-up tolerance over the years, I've learned that there were far more painful things to endure. This was only a small hurdle compared to the fire 14 years ago, and when I was in that cavern last year. Twice this body of mine has failed me when I needed it most. The fire was more first true experience of being in pain to where I was knocking on death's doorsteps, but the second time it failed me was when I truly experienced agony. That day when my body failed, it had cost me the ultimate price. I lost a part of myself, and then some. The burdens were too great to bear, and I would never forgive myself for what happened. I lost so much because I wasn't strong enough that someone else had to take my place. They made the ultimate sacrifice while I could only look on in my pathetic broken form. Never would I allow that to happen again. Any suffering I would experience would be incomparable to that night in the caves. Opening my eyes, I gazed upon Zabuza's sunken form as he stared in disbelief and exhaustion on his knees. His fingers twitched as he tried comprehending what just happened. One moment he was on the verge of being victorious. The next? Gone. Slipped right through his fingers like an eel. I brought my bow up and aimed at his stunned form. I traced several normal arrows, pulled back on the strings, and shot them in non-lethal spots towards Zabuza. 2 arrows struck him on both sides near his shoulder. 2 more flew onto either of his thighs, disabling any form of movement. The last arrow shot barely above his right lung, just under the other arrow. I ensured that all of my shots would only temporarily disable him, and not kill. I didn't want them dead. If I did, I would have killed them straight off the bat instead of carousing around with them for so long. The bow in my hands released and dispersed into bright blue particles of light before they disappeared. The fight was over against Zabuza and Raiga. I released a tired breath before walking sedately over to the swordsman's defeated form. My face contorted and I gritted my teeth as I winced at the spasms shooting throughout my right arm. Shit, come on, not now of all times. I refrained from drawing attention to my arm and did my best to try and not grab onto it. The sounds of metal grinding against each other, and the feeling of my circuits being on fire was excruciating, but I held fast so far. I couldn't let any know or draw suspicion to my right arm. Steeling my face, I hid my discomfort and continued on. I considered myself lucky when it finally stopped before I got near Zabuza. As I got closer, he coughed up globs of blood staining his pristine white bandaged mask. I unsealed the journal, flipping through to the last entry before taking a knee down to his level and laying the book gently onto the ground for him to read. Where did you get this?" he asked as he read the journal's entry. "I was out looking for where you guys were based on this island when I came across Gato's building. To my surprise, it was completely empty, and I looked around for anything useful. It was also the same time that I realized that you and your team were at the bridge," I replied as I willed the arrows to disperse. I flipped the page over to allow him to read the last pages. He looked confused and bewildered as he finished reading. "Why?" He coughed up some more blood. "Why didn't you kill us all? What's your reasoning for sparing us?" I looked away from him to appreciate the view of the sky and water below before replying. "Because I don't believe in killing for the sake of killing. I know your story, Momochi Zabuza. Your motives for defecting your nation. Your reason for gathering funds and power. I don't know all of it, but I know a good bit and can fill in the blanks from simple deduction. But we're enemies. I worked for Gato and you for Hataki," he said it as if it were that simple. "We are Shinobi. We're supposed to kill each other." "Correction. You," I pointed at him, "are Shinobi." I pointed back at myself. "I'm not. I haven't considered myself one in over 4 years, and even then I never really wanted to be a shinobi. That's just not me. I'm not out here to kill people on someone else's orders. I'm not a killer for hire like you. I'm here to help and save people, even if it means if I have to knock some sense into people." "Then you're a goddamn fool," he tried laughing at me, but began coughing up some more blood. "How do you expect to save people without killing? It's impossible to not kill in this world that we live in." "I never said that I didn't kill, that's just your assumption. I made it my mission to save innocent lives from others who would try and take advantage of them. Don't presume that just because you've lived longer in this world that you know more than me, Zabuza." I began walking around him. "I'll gladly dip my hands and drench them in blood so that others don't have to. I'll hold the weight of the world by myself if I had to. The only reason why I spared you and your team was because you are simply misguided and out of the loop about the situation in your village." He scrunched his eyebrows in confusion. "Misguided? Out of the loop?" I stopped my pacing right in front of him. "The Yonde Mizukage has been dead for a while, you idiot. You were so zealous in your endeavor to gather power and funds to overthrow him you forgot to pay attention to the news. The despot was removed from power less than a year ago by a good friend of yours and since then has been recalling all those branded as traitors of the state to come home. What? You've got to be shitting me. I closed my eyes too and resisted the urge to smack my face with my hand. You seriously didn't know? No way. Absolutely no way in hell did this numbskull not know about the open recall for all former hidden Miss Shinobi. He seemed to be at an absolute loss for words. He really didn't know. Lord Almighty. By all that is holy and sacred of the root and Akasha. This idiot here was so engrossed in getting support and funding for his second coup d'etat that he missed the recall. You're an absolute idiot, did you know that? There's nothing that comes to my mind right now to describe how utterly stupid you are. In fact, it would be insulting for all stupid people to call you stupid. Seriously, the only reason why this guy was considered a rogue shinobi along with Raiga were the fact that they attempted to assassinate the former Mizukage but failed and fled before they were killed. The recall was heard from the farthest corners of the world, parading around with the dead body of former leader for all to see, to let everyone know that it wasn't a trick or a trap. What was worse is that this guy probably operated in and around the area. I would have said that he was a paranoid bastard, but by how confused he sounded and his face contorted gave it away that he really didn't know about the recall. Remember when I said even if it means I have to knock some sense into people? I have half a mind to knock some sense into your head right now into the pavement. I stared blandly at him as he was slipping into a catatonic state that everything he was doing was all for naught. Go home, you idiot. Take your team and go home. Akasha Almighty, I was definitely ranking this up there in the strangest and or dumbest things to have occurred list. Team 7 stood stock still, or rather Kakashi stood there while his team and Tazuna were on the ground staring on ahead trying to make sense of what just happened. What the fuck? Kakashi turned to Daisuke and chastised him. Language, Daisuke, you're still in the presence of our client. The client in question coughed and repeated the same thing. What the fuck? The white-haired shinobi rolled his eyes as before processing what happened so far. It was fairly enlightening to see Naruto in action and studying his new skills and abilities. His swordplay was, simply put, beyond his now at this point with how he took on both of his enemies with nothing but a single sword. Though that invisible cloak he has around his weapon is interesting, he noted. It certainly wasn't an illusion, as his left eye would have been able to see through it completely. From an observation standpoint on the small distortions around the blade, and how it moved similar to wind. It's most likely a high-level wind technique coating the blade to hide it from view. He narrowed his eyes as he racked his brain of wind techniques that allowed a person to do that. The closest thing he could come up with was the blade of wind technique, but even then it came up short compared to the thing that Naruto was wielding. Then there's that sword he used as a makeshift arrow. That was definitely intriguing, especially that incantation that he used. That was definitely the Far West language that he spoke in. I know he traveled around a lot, but to that extent? What business did he have over there? No one from the main continent ever traveled to the Far West for a multitude of reasons. The simplest being the rather exorbitant cost to travel from here to the other side of the planet. There weren't many ships that made the trip to cross the ocean, and even then sailing was a perilous journey as it was constantly fraught with hurricanes and freak storms that could capsize a ship. Another way you could possibly travel was through land, but traveling eastward you would only find yourself with a seemingly never-ending desert and wasteland. There was a very good reason why the land of air and rock were nothing but desert and rocks respectively. It just wasn't feasible nor worth it. But there's also an unspoken ban too. He had only heard of it in passing when he was in Black Ops, and the few conversations he had with Kiritsugu. One of the major things blocking trade and travel was due to the conflicting interests of the ruling caste of this continent, and the two organizations that made up the ruling body of the Far West. One was a widespread religious organization called the Holy Church. The other was the apparent international, self-preservative and self-defense organization composed of three main branches. Kakashi had definitely came across the Holy Church in the past during his Black Ops days. He had met traveling priests in passing that had somehow made it onto the main continent. In all honesty, I never really got the whole mumbo-jumbo about religion, but maybe in hindsight I should have now that Naruto's speaking their language. How they made it all the way over here was a mystery to him. Then there was the other ruling body. It was quite possibly one of the most clandestine organizations that he had ever heard about. Kiritsuga had mentioned them now and then in passing conversation, but never truly delved deep into it unless it was with Naruto in private. He sighed before rubbing his eyebrows. The more I think, the more questions are popping up. He casted a look on Naruto as he circled Zabuza's form, chastising him and calling said rogue shinobi an idiot. What have you gotten yourself caught up in that year you went missing, Naruto? Kakashi vowed to find out when they got back home. All of this was starting to give him a headache as he delved deeper in thought. There was going to be a lot of explaining to do, and maybe a stiff drink to help digest it all, he thought tiredly. Kakashi took a glance at his team to see if they were all right. His team had finally gotten off the ground and Sakura was making her rounds with her teammates and the client. It was comforting for him in a way to see a diligent student of his that was well on her way to becoming one of the finest medical personnel in the country. In a way it tugged at his heart as he was reminded of a former deceased teammate that also had the same aspirations as Sakura. Maybe that was why he tended to expect the most out of her compared to the rest of his team. The comparisons between her and Sakura were uncanny and quite frankly frightening if he admitted to anyone. He scratched his head and sighed softly. A quote came bubbling up from the back of his head: history tends to repeat itself. Rung true. How cruel to see similar parallels of people he used to know and the ones who were living among his students. Moving his attention to Sasuke and Daisuke, their reactions were one of shock and awe while the other full of incredulousness respectively. It were almost as if they were catatonic with how they just kept staring at Naruto. In Sasuke's case, her eyes were flitting back and forth from Naruto and to where the massive water vortex used to be in the sky, and Daisuke's jaw kept opening and closing slightly, having trouble comprehending the power he witnessed. For one Uchiha Sasuke, her head was currently racked with questions and internal argument, her pretty face being marred by her scowl and furrowed brows. Throughout the entire fight, after Naruto had inadvertently saved both her and Daisuke by simply crashing through the dome into the shinobi and shattering all the mirrors by speed alone. The speed he showed was pure insanity. One moment he had his back exposed and was about to be hit by that lightning technique, then he just turned and swatted it away like it was a fly. My Sharingan couldn't even keep up. It's supposed to be able to predict and see everything with the utmost clarity, and yet everything was just a blur. In fact, the more she tried concentrating during the fight, her eyes began to bleed and a sharp pain began prickling the back of her head before she stopped the flow of chakra to her eyes. Then came the sword fight, which left her in complete awe. In fact, her jaw dropped at the intensity of the fight and the sheer amount of sparks flying when the blades met each other. Not to mention the power of his summoned weapons. She couldn't make heads or tails of what he said. It looked like a summoning technique. I think. Maybe just a different language? At first, when she saw it, she stared at it, and him skeptically, and thought he was insane. What was a simple sword going to do against a swirling mass of death? Her opinion immediately changed as soon as he took hold of the sword, and then it suddenly combusted with the hottest flames she had ever felt. I was a good ways from him, and it still felt like I was getting cooked. Then, as if he felt to surprise them even more, he actually knocked the blade onto his bow before, to what she guessed, gathered chakra and causing the flaming blade to leap to another level of power. When he pulled back the string, the sword had actually changed to an arrow-like form before he said something in another language again, and shooting it. In 1 second there was utter darkness encroaching upon them. The next? Gone in a cloud of steam. For one Uchiha Sasuke, this was the level of skill and power she needed to attain. This was the level that she aspired to be at. They were essentially the same age, yet he was light years ahead of her. I have to, she resolutely thought, I have to ask him to teach me. Even if it's just a few pointers with my swordplay, it'll still go a long ways for me. He won't like that. The voice in her head whispered softly in an almost sing-song-like tone. At the resurgence at hearing her second voice, she tightened her grip on her chikudo, causing the knuckles on her hand to go white. She squeezed her eyes shut to block it out, breathing in and out methodically. I think I need help. From the back of her mind it sounded like it giggled before disappearing. If someone were to ask her how life was going on right now, she could sum it up in 4 words. like a sinking ship. She gave a depressed sigh. Daisuke turned to her about to ask what was wrong before they all heard a boisterous laugh and loud clapping resounding throughout the relatively quiet bridge. Everyone turned around and directed their attention to the person that was laughing like a pig while clapping like a cymbal monkey. What greeted their eyes made Kakashi's students step back and Tazuna scrambling away to get behind them for protection. Kakashi simply narrowed his eyes to the new additions to the fighting. Right on time, you fat bastard, thought Naruto. With Gato's hired shinobi all incapacitated and Team 7 looking generally worse for wear, the business tycoon took the bait and brought out his forces to finish them off. Gato had brought with him a decently sized private army composed of thugs, disgraced or lordless samurai, and shinobi rejects that didn't make it out of the general academy from wherever they came from. All in all, they probably add up to around 100 at least. It was a rough estimate, but from the fact that Gato's compound was completely empty save for the 2 guards, he took a gander that this was him going all in to make sure the shinobi on the bridge were deader than dead. An assistant came up to Gato with a megaphone to help project his voice. Well, Zabuza. You and your team has done a splendid job. But I'm afraid we're going to have to terminate our contract early. The deal's off. Ha ha ha. Naruto began making his way back over to where Team 7 were and gave Gato and his private army a blank bored stare. You see, you shinobi are quite expensive, and seeing as how you've technically failed at eliminating Gato and those shinobi from Konoha, I took it upon myself to get the job done. Like my father always said, if you want it done right, you have to do it yourself. And here I am, with me and some friends to finish the job. The blonde-haired hero rolled his eyes. Here we go with the monologue. Then he's going to explain his grand plan, what he's going to do, something about betrayal, was never going to actually pay, something I'm so great, something now you all die. And Gato did just that to the T by raucously shouting and sending spittle into the megaphone about how it was all a setup and how he in the end he was going to be the one on top. I deserve a pat on the back for that, mused Naruto. Now, was it the 20th or 21st time someone gave me a monologue? I think I lost count at. Shit, I can't remember. He'd had to consult with his record keepings later as Gato finished boasting. Naruto took a few steps toward Gato, still leaving a relatively sizable distance for the enemy to cross. He pointed a finger lazily at the suit-wearing man out in the front. You are the one who's been driving this island into poverty, correct? What's ID to you if I am? I'll ask of you this once, surrender and repent. At that, Gato laughed obnoxiously along with his army. Are you fucking dumb? I am Gato, one of the richest men in the world. I couldn't give a shit about the people who live on this island. I'll rape and pillage this town, and no one in the outside world will ever know better. Naruto withered through the taunts and jeering, being calm as ever. Then this will make it easier for me. The corporate leader lowered his megaphone. Kill them all, but don't hurt the 3 girls too much. They'll fetch a nice price out on the slave markets. That was their signal. Gato's army roared and yelled before charging altogether. They all raised the weapons high into the sky, believing it to be an easy fight for them. That with sheer numbers they could overwhelm the small group of shinobi. Oh, how they were so foolish and wrong to believe that. Kakashi and his team got into ready positions with him, starting a chain of seals before they were stopped by Naruto holding his hands out to stop them for doing anything. What are you doing, Naruto? They all looked at him as if he were insane, as a veritable wall of men were charging at them. He didn't respond except raising his right hand in the air just above his head. Trace on. A massive amount of chakra spiked from Naruto as his form was surrounded by blue-green light energy swirling around him. Begin projection, he intoned to himself. Gato's army was 50 meters out. He had plenty of time before they reached them. Against this enemy, Uzumaki Naruto would not have to use any of his noble phantasms. No. Against this rabble, simple swords would suffice. It would be insulting and degrading for his collection of high-tiered crystallized mysteries to be stained with the blood of filth and trash. En masse his projections began appearing above him, filling the sky with blade weaponry. Swords of all classifications materialized in white-blue light particles. Broadswords. Long swords. Short swords. Bastard swords. Great swords. Full-bladed swords. Side swords. Dual-bladed swords. Two-handed swords. One-handed swords. For anyone witnessing this for the first time, it was mesmerizing and amazing all at once, yet equally terrifying as the particles took shape into weapons. Gato had brought an army. Uzumaki Naruto would match that with his swords and then some. Roll out. Bullet clear. The sky was filled with swords as he finished projecting them all out into the real world. The mercenary army was now 30 meters out. Team 7 and Kakashi could only look on in pure wonder above them, the enemy encroaching upon them already forgotten as they stared up. As one they all turned and aimed at the army that was charging at them blindly. It would be too late for them to retreat. They were too far gone at this point. There would be no regrets in this. This was the only path. Freeze out. Processes completed. All projections stand by, ceasing decompression. They were now only 20 meters out. Naruto casted his gaze upon them all. A feeling of pensive sadness welled upon inside him. All these men, all 100 of them were charging to their deaths. He would make it swift. He would make it painless. Only a monster would indulge in delight upon seeing their foes wither in pain and suffering before being released unto death's grasps. He was not a monster. Just before Naruto released the swords, for the briefest of moments, he hesitated. In his heart, he could feel it clench at what he was about to do. His eyes narrowed and he steeled his face and his heart. These were people who would rape and pillage the town if they weren't stopped. Gato would simply continue to commit more atrocities after this. He had done this many times, but after what occurred to him the last year he couldn't help but think for a fleeting moment, was he any different from him? No. He closed his eyes before opening them, staring straight on at the army. He swore to himself and others that he would never be like him. Sword barrel full open. He brought his hand down swiftly. All projections successive fire. The swords in the air briefly glowed blue before shooting towards the charging men. Each and every one of them shot out faster than a bullet. The force of the swords accelerating faster than the speed of sound obliterated the charging enemy. A great many of them were skewered into the concrete of the bridge. They didn't even have time to scream or register the pain for very long before they were silenced by more swords. Like a scythe reaping through a field of crops, they all fell. The easy battle that the enemy had sought was actually a massacre in disguise. No. One could not be able to constitute this a battle. It was far from it. A battle meant that each side had a modicum of chance at winning. This was the complete opposite of a battle. It was like watching lambs charging headstrong into the slaughter. When the last man fell, all that stood was Gato unharmed and untouched in a catatonic state. Naruto had purposely made sure to not let any of his swords near him. He wanted the people of this island to get their justice. From behind Naruto stood Team 7 and their client. For Daisuke, Sakura and Tazuna, they had never seen such carnage and bloodbath on a large scale before like this. They were at a loss for words at how to piece together what happened in front of them. One moment there was an army charging at them. The next they were all dead, impaled into the ground by hundreds of swords. Sasuke was looking a little worse for wear as memories that she buried long ago began crawling back up to the forefront of her mind. The night that she discovered her clan slaughtered in the streets and strewn about was one of the most horrific things that she had ever experienced as an 8-year-old. When she walked through those bloodied streets, it was like stepping further and further into hell itself. As she stared at the carnage before her, her fractured mind began to subtly superimpose her deceased clan's faces onto the dead army in front. The whole clan was her family, and being slowly transported back into her own hell began to show its effects on Sasuke. Her breathing became heavier and her hands began to clam up and began to involuntarily shake. It was starting to become hard to breathe for her. Her vision began to swim, and her legs shook as they had trouble supporting her weakening resolve. And then, like a house of cards, she dropped to her knees and upchucked the contents in her stomach onto the bridge. Sasuke! Sakura dropped next to Sasuke, checking up on her. She felt her teammate's body convulse again. It's okay, it's okay. She brushed her back to calm her down. Sasuke began to involuntarily cry due to past trauma resurfacing and not being properly healed and counseled. Sasuke, it's alright. I'm right here for you. The medic Nin was trying her best, but she hadn't delved too far into the realm of psychology as she would have liked to. She turned her attention towards Daisuke and saw that he was just standing there staring at them. Her eyes narrowed at him in disdain. Some kind of boyfriend, you are, Tsubasa. It would be some time before Sasuke fully composed herself. Naruto sighed loudly enough that everyone heard him redirected their focus to him. His red holy shroud billowed in the sea wind softly before he walked sedately towards Gato. The field of swords impaled into the corpses were oddly angled towards him as if begging for their master to wield them. He waded through the field of bodies. Along the way he pulled out a sword from one of the corpses and flicked the blade to his right, shaking off any blood on the sword. By this point Gato was proverbially shitting his pants as the visage of Naruto encroached upon him closer and closer. The man backpedaled before tripping on himself and feebly tried crawling away. I'll pay you. How much do you want? Name your price. His response was merely an eyebrow ever so slightly rising in question. 50 million? How about 100 million yen? Or, how about 250 million yen? Naruto cracked a smirk. It was always interesting how people with an exorbitant amount of wealth would always throw money at a problem. That any and everything could be solved with money and money alone. The tyrant before him started begging and sobbing for his life, but he ignored it all. Twirling the sword in his hand, he gripped it in reverse and brought it down onto Gato's knee, impaling him into the bridge. Gawk! You son of a bitch! I have powerful connections. Powerful friends across the world. Why, you don't know who you're fucking with? And when you denied their pitiful pleas for mercy, they showed their true colors. They'll come after you. Your head will be on a pike, ha 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 ha. You're fucked, kid. Even if I die, I'll have the last laugh. Naruto simply stared at him impassively as he ranted and raved. It was starting to get annoying, so he pulled the sword free. The shipping magnate screamed as he did so, and brandished it towards him. Gato flinched back and silenced immediately, albeit his whimpering could be heard. Or, Tazuna. Why, yes? You're the de facto leader of this island, correct? Tazuna racked his brain before answering. Why, yeah. I'm the only one left that's able to manage this town. Good, good. Then as the leader you now have two choices. He brought up one finger in the air. The first one is I execute him right here, right now. We get it done and over with. He brought up another finger. Or the second one, he stands trial and then he hangs. The first choice was purely for Naruto. A selfish choice, as he would gain the satisfaction of the blow, and sating his conscience for the atrocities done by the man to the island. It wasn't the most glorious path and neither the most heroic, but many times you weren't able to avoid bloodshed for the greater good. It just wasn't worth the risk to allow a criminal to run amok again. The second choice would be the most heroic and noble. It would allow the villagers to hold the reins to Gato's life and allow them retribution for the aggressions made by their oppressor. It would be justice in its purest form. Justice that these people have longed for many years. Justice that these people craved. Tazuna looked visibly shocked. It was the first time he held someone else's life in his hands. The power to save or kill. He looked conflicted with himself before his shoulders sagged. Trial. As much as I want that bastard to die right here. The people need to speak their grievances and see him on trial, then executed. The people of this village need their closure. Please spare him so that he may go to trial and then hanged, as you said. Naruto turned and gave Gato a smug grin. You can consider your days numbered. He gritted his teeth. Who the fuck are you? Across from where the uncompleted side of the bridge. Zabuza's voice echoed through the area with realization. You're the wrought iron hero. After witnessing Naruto's signature style of what essentially was a mass sword spam, it was fairly easy to connect two and two together. The wandering hero whose sole power was swords and his archery skills were known far and wide. A feared individual whose stories spoke of being able to blot out the sun with his swords. From there his tale was spread. A legend had been born. It was not a name he had given to himself, but by foes whom he had conquered and lived to tell the tale, and those whom he had saved by the blade. They all had a part in fueling his story. The tales of how he saved villages, towns, and even countries were renowned by people all over. The governments of the hidden villages and their respective ruling lords had their curiosity piqued and covertly sent in Black Op agents to investigate. It was all done secretly as they didn't want to bring any more attention to the individual that was upsetting the status quo of the minor nations and villages. Each and every team that was sent came back fruitless in their endeavors to find Naruto. All they had were reports and hearsay of his deeds by the local populace that he had saved. After months of sending in teams and coming back empty-handed, one nation ordered their own groups to spread the word of how a town had been under oppression from a ruling local lord to draw him out. They laid in the bait, but somewhere down the line it had gone all horribly wrong, and the orders had become jumbled up in the mix. Instead of masquerading the town of Crying Wolf, the group of individuals had done the complete opposite. The Black Ops team had slaughtered the entire populace to garner his attention, and told any fleeing survivors to spread the word of the incident. They were quite successful in doing so, but also drew his ire and contempt. They had killed every single person, man, woman, child, and elderly. It did not matter who, they had killed the people living in the town indiscriminately, all for the sake of trying to find Naruto's identity. The absurdity of the lengths that the Shinobi team had gone to catch his attention angered him beyond all questioning. Suffice to say, they did not acquire a name nor a face to the individual going around the continent playing hero for the people. So in return he had slaughtered them when he questioned if they were the ones that committed such barbarism. In the end he had spared one, and when that individual retreated back to his village, all he could mutter to his superiors about his traumatic experience was one word on repeat: swords. Those who had met him would always ask why he was doing this. He would reply that all he wanted to do was to save people and make them happy. That was his only wish in its purest form. He wanted to do it not for fame or glory, but for the sake of making others happy. It was from there, with his association with swords and wanting to save others, that his name was born. The wrought iron hero. He had never given his real name to anyone. He didn't sought the praise and glory for his name. It wasn't what he was there for. For the nameless hero who no one could identify, the Shinobi and the people ordained the name for him. Those who knew his signature power and style would immediately recognize who he was. Naruto paid no attention to Zabuza blurting out his given moniker. Flipping the sword in his hand, he used the hilt to knock Gato out. It felt a little anticlimactic for now, but he was going to enjoy watching Gato squirm in the trial against the people of the island. The blonde magus winced as a sharp pain shot throughout his arm. This time he wasn't able to hold off the urge to grab it, and breathed in sharply, hissing at the feeling of hot rod being shoved down his arm. He was going to have to look into it after he got home and into his workshop. This was going to be a problem later on down the road if he didn't look into it in time. For Kakashi, it only heightened his suspicion about the red cloth that was wrapped around Naruto's hand he had seen almost a week ago. He narrowed his eyes at Naruto grabbing his arm. There would be indeed many questions that needed to be answered once they all got back to Konoha. Across from the bridge, hidden away in the thick foliage on the island, a small snow-white rat, with red eyes, a tiny golden crown sat upon its head, with a checkered brown/light brown cape and a red ruby gem held in its arms, watched on from its secluded spot. 2. It had the perfect view to record the events on the bridge. From start to finish it watched it all. As soon as its target had finished knocking out the man known as Gato, it scurried off, retreating from the general vicinity. The rat had achieved its assigned objective. There was no need to be in the area until its target was on the move again. A Miyakun has been found.